My name is Zara and I am 33 years old. For 5 years of marriage, my husband and I could not have a child. We spent thousands on treatments and cried over countless negative tests. Then he decided to have twins with my childhood best friend. When I found out, I did not scream or break things. I quietly signed the divorce papers and handed him everything he thought he wanted. But when he proudly showed the sonogram to his mother later that day, she went completely pale and asked him a question that destroyed his entire reality. Wait, she did not tell you. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you believe karma always collects its debts. I dragged my heavy luggage through the custom mahogany doors of our luxury modern townhouse in Atlanta. My feet ached from a grueling 2-week business trip in London. As a senior financial auditor, I was used to exhausting schedules and high-pressure negotiations. I was accustomed to analyzing complex spreadsheets and finding discrepancies that others missed. But nothing in my rigorous professional training could have prepared me for the discrepancy I was about to find in my own living room. I expected the house to be quiet. I expected to drop my bags, take a long, hot shower, and maybe order some takeout from my favorite spot down the street. I wanted nothing more than to kick off my heels and finally relax. Instead, I walked into the foyer and heard soft, murmuring voices coming from the main living area. I pushed past the decorative glass partition and froze in my tracks. My husband Darren sat on our custom velvet sofa. Beside him, sitting uncomfortably close with her legs tucked underneath her, was Tasha. Tasha was my childhood best friend, a lifestyle influencer who built her massive online brand on wellness tips and female empowerment. They were not just sitting together chatting like normal friends. Darren had his hand resting intimately on her stomach, and her stomach was unmistakably noticeably round. She was heavily pregnant. I stood there in my tailored business suit, my hand still gripping the handle of my suitcase so tightly, my knuckles turned white. The silence in the room was sudden and suffocating. The low hum of the television in the background seemed to amplify the absolute betrayal unfolding right in front of my eyes. Darren did not jump up in a panic. He did not look guilty or ashamed or remorseful. He looked at me with a calm, calculated expression that sent a visceral chill straight down my spine. Tasha did not flinch either. She actually smiled, a small, tight smile that held absolutely no warmth. She was holding a black and white sonogram photo in her perfectly manicured hand. Darren stood up slowly, deliberately, smoothing the front of his expensive designer polo shirt. He walked over to the glass coffee table and picked up a thick manila folder that had been resting next to a pair of crystal coasters. He slid it across the smooth surface toward me, the paper scraping against the glass. "Zara, it is over," he said, his voice completely flat and devoid of any emotion. I stared at him, trying to process the finality of those words. Over. 5 years of marriage erased in an instant. 5 years of supporting his endless string of tech startups. 5 years of paying the heavy mortgage on this beautiful townhouse, while he continuously tried to find his footing as a visionary entrepreneur. "Tasha is giving me what you could not." "For 5 long years," he continued, crossing his arms over his chest in a defensive posture. "We are building a real Black family legacy, Zara. An empire that will last for generations. You are too obsessed with your spreadsheets, your corporate ladders, and your business trips to be a proper mother. You chose your career over giving me a family. Tasha understands what a real man needs to thrive." I looked at Tasha, my best friend since we were 7 years old, sharing secrets on the playground. The woman who stood right beside me as my maid of honor at my wedding. The woman who held my hand while I cried over failed pregnancy tests, offering me empty words of comfort. She shifted her weight, adjusting her position on my sofa, and began gently rubbing her swollen belly. "No hard feelings, Z," she said, her voice dripping with an artificial sweetness that made my stomach turn. "A man needs an heir to carry on his name. You know exactly how important building generational wealth and a strong family legacy is to Darren. We are having twins, 2 beautiful boys. It is an absolute blessing from above." The sheer audacity of her words washed over me like a tidal wave. Generational wealth, legacy. Darren was a 35-year-old startup CEO whose company had not turned a single dollar of profit in 3 years. The generational wealth they were so proudly talking about was entirely funded by my senior auditor salary. The luxury townhouse they were sitting in, making themselves so comfortable, was paid for by my annual bonuses. The designer clothes on their backs, the expensive cars in the driveway, were all financed by my excellent credit score. I looked down at the thick manila folder resting on the coffee table. I knew exactly what it was without having to open the cover. Divorce papers. He had brought his pregnant mistress into my home to ambush me with legal documents the exact moment I returned from a draining international trip. He wanted to break me down completely. He wanted tears and begging and desperate hysterics so he could feel completely justified in his betrayal. He wanted me to play the tragic role of the bitter, barren career woman so he and Tasha could walk away as the triumphant victims who finally found true love against all odds. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not throw my heavy luggage or break the expensive imported vases lining the hallway walls. Years of navigating highly aggressive boardrooms and dismantling massive corporate frauds had taught me one vital, undeniable lesson. Emotion is a terrible liability when you are dealing with a hostile takeover, and this was exactly that, a hostile takeover of my entire life. I let go of my suitcase handle. I walked deliberately toward the coffee table, the sharp click of my heels echoing loudly off the pristine hardwood floor. I reached into the inside pocket of my tailored blazer and pulled out my Mont Blanc pen. The exact pen Darren had bought me using my own money to celebrate my major promotion last year. I flipped open the heavy folder. The dense legal jargon jumped out at me, but I did not bother reading the specific demands or the lengthy asset divisions. I already knew exactly what Darren wanted. He wanted the house. He wanted the luxury vehicles. He wanted half of my hard-earned savings to fund his ongoing illusion of a corporate empire. Zara, what are you doing? Darren asked, a sudden flicker of uncertainty crossing his arrogant face. You need to review those documents with a proper lawyer. I am sure you will want to fight over the assets, but I am fully prepared for a lengthy battle. My legal team is ready for whatever you throw at us. I completely ignored his rambling. I flipped directly to the very last page of the document. I clicked my pen and signed my name on the designated line with smooth, precise strokes, never once breaking my rhythm. I dated the signature block. I closed the folder and tossed it back onto the glass table. It landed with a highly satisfying thud. Keep the house, Darren, I said, my voice perfectly level and entirely empty of sorrow. Keep the beautiful legacy. I truly hope it brings you exactly what you deserve. Tasha looked utterly confused. Her smug, triumphant expression wavered significantly. You are just signing it. Just like that. You are not going to fight us in court over any of this. I looked at her swollen stomach and then directly up into her deceitful eyes. There is absolutely nothing here worth fighting for, Tasha. You can have him. I turned back to my soon-to-be ex-husband. I will have my assistant send a moving team for the rest of my personal belongings tomorrow morning. Do not touch a single item in my home office. I turned on my heel, grabbed my suitcase handle, and walked straight out the front door without ever looking back. The heavy mahogany door clicked shut securely behind me, severing my painful past from my promising future. The humid Atlanta air hit my face as I walked down the long driveway to my waiting car. I felt a strange, exhilarating sense of weightlessness. They thought they had successfully ambushed me. They thought they had outsmarted the senior financial auditor. What they did not realize was that I had known about this miserable affair for 3 entire months. I had known about the pregnancy, and I had spent every single day of those 3 months meticulously preparing for this exact moment. Inside the townhouse, Darren was undoubtedly already celebrating his massive victory. I could imagine the pathetic scene perfectly. He probably pulled Tasha into his arms, kissing her and telling her how easily I had folded under pressure. He thought he had won the ultimate lottery. He had the luxury house, the pending divorce settlement, and his brand new heirs to carry on his precious name. Darren was so incredibly eager to share his perceived victory that he immediately pulled out his smartphone and dialed his mother. Gloria was a prominent figure in her local megachurch, always dressed in matching designer hats and suits, always preaching loudly about the strict importance of traditional family values. She had never really liked me. She thought I was far too independent, too intensely focused on my career, and not nearly submissive enough for her perfect, successful son. She had constantly pressured us about giving her grandchildren, making highly passive-aggressive comments at every single holiday dinner we attended. I knew Darren could not wait to tell her the grand news. He desperately wanted to hear her praise him for finally securing the legacy she was so deeply obsessed with. As I started my car engine and pulled swiftly away from the curb, I imagined the ensuing phone call. I imagined Darren boasting loudly about the twins showing off the sonogram over a video call, fully expecting his mother to weep with joyous tears. Instead, I knew exactly what was about to happen next. Because I possessed a critical piece of medical information that Darren, in all his arrogant narcissistic glory, had completely forgotten or perhaps willfully ignored for years. A piece of medical history so deeply buried in his fragile ego that he had successfully convinced himself it simply did not exist. Darren was about to show that black and white sonogram to Gloria. He was about to confidently tell her that Tasha was carrying his twin boys. And Gloria, the woman who kept meticulous, detailed records of every family event, every illness, and every secret, was going to look at that sonogram and her entire world was going to violently stop. She was going to drop her crystal glass. She was going to turn as pale as a ghost, and she was going to ask him the one terrifying question that would instantly unravel his entire pristine illusion. Wait, she did not tell you. As I drove toward the luxury hotel suite I had booked weeks in advance, I let a genuine, satisfied smile cross my face. The war had not just ended in that living room. It had only just beautifully begun. And Darren was about to realize that he had brought a plastic knife to a devastating drone strike. The massive empire he thought he was building was nothing more than a fragile house of cards. And I was the storm that was about to blow it all completely down. Darren did not waste a single second after the heavy custom mahogany door clicked shut behind his wife. He pulled his smartphone from his tailored slacks and immediately dialed his mother. Gloria Vance was a woman who demanded to be the absolute first to know everything that happened in her son's life. As a senior deaconess at the largest megachurch in Atlanta, she ran her family image with the ruthless precision of a high-stakes political campaign. Darren poured himself a generous glass of aged bourbon from the crystal decanter and grinned at Tasha. Within 20 short minutes, Gloria strutted through the front door, wearing a tailored peach church suit and her signature string of oversized pearls. She did not even bother knocking, assuming her rightful place as the matriarch of the household. "My beautiful, successful boy, Gloria," announced, throwing her arms open wide. She walked straight past the empty space in the foyer, where Zara usually kept her leather briefcase, and pulled Darren into a suffocatingly tight hug. She then turned her sharp, judgmental eyes toward Tasha, who was sitting perfectly poised on the custom velvet sofa. "And look at you, glowing with the Lord's absolute blessing. I always knew you had the right spirit for this family." Tasha stood up slowly, making sure to emphasize her heavily pregnant belly as she smoothed the fabric of her expensive maternity dress. "We wanted you to be the very first person to know Mom. Zara is officially gone. She did not even put up a fight. She signed the divorce papers right there on the table." Gloria clapped her hands together in genuine, unadulterated delight. She walked over to the glass coffee table, her heels clicking sharply, and picked up the thick manila divorce folder. She flipped directly to the back page and ran her freshly manicured finger over Zara's bold, precise signature. "Praise God above. I told you from the very beginning that woman was entirely too stiff for our bloodline. She was too obsessively focused on climbing the corporate ladder and auditing other people's money to build a proper Black family. A man of your prominent stature needs a strong legacy, Darren. He needs strong heirs to carry his name. 5 years of her empty womb was nothing but a heavy curse on this family's joy." Darren puffed out his chest, soaking in his mother's profound approval. I took care of it, Ma, just like a real man should. I got the beautiful townhouse. I got my absolute freedom, and Tasha here is giving me twins. He reached over to the table and picked up the black and white sonogram photo. He handed it to his mother with a triumphant, arrogant grin. Look at them. The next glorious generation of Vance men ready to take over the world. Gloria took the small, glossy photo, holding it up to the light. Tasha walked over to the wet bar, her hips swaying with unearned confidence, and poured 3 glasses of expensive sparkling cider for a celebratory toast. The room was thick with their shared arrogance and misplaced victory. They believed they had successfully pushed out the cold, calculating woman who actually funded their entire luxurious lifestyle. But as Gloria stared closely at the black and white image of the 2 tiny fetuses, her expression began to undergo a terrifying transformation. The triumphant, arrogant smile melted completely off her face, leaving behind a mask of pure horror. The warm color drained entirely from her cheeks, leaving her looking gray, and suddenly very old. Her hands began to tremble violently, causing the glossy paper to shake. Tasha walked back over, balancing the 3 heavy crystal glasses on a silver tray. Let us toast to the new Vance Empire, Tasha said brightly, completely oblivious to the shifting atmosphere in the room. Gloria did not reach for a glass. Her eyes remained locked on the sonogram, as if it were a venomous snake preparing to strike. Suddenly, her hand opened completely. The photo fluttered harmlessly to the floor. Gloria staggered backward, her high heel catching on the edge of the expensive Persian rug, and she knocked forcefully into the silver tray Tasha was holding. The crystal glasses tipped over instantly and crashed onto the hardwood floor, shattering into dozens of sharp, dangerous pieces. The sticky, sparkling cider pooled rapidly around their expensive designer shoes. Mom, Darren shouted, stepping forward quickly to catch her arm before she could fall. What is wrong with you? You are completely ruining the celebration. Gloria grabbed Darren violently by the collar of his expensive designer polo shirt. Her manicured nails dug sharply and painfully into the skin of his neck. She pulled him down to her eye level, breathing heavily, her chest heaving with sudden, sheer panic. Wait, she did not tell you. Tasha did not tell you the truth. Darren pulled back, feeling highly confused and increasingly irritated by his mother's sudden hysterical outburst. Tell me what? That it is twins. I just told you she is having twins. Gloria shook her head violently, her carefully styled hair falling out of place. No, Darren. Whose babies are those? Darren let out a harsh, dismissive laugh, pushing his mother's hands away from his collar. What kind of crazy, disrespectful question is that? They are mine. I am finally going to be a father after 5 years of misery. Gloria slapped his chest hard with the back of her trembling hand. Her voice dropped to a terrified, harsh whisper that cut through the room like a jagged knife. You had severe bilateral mumps orchitis when you were 15 years old, Darren. You spent 3 terrifying weeks in the intensive care unit. The fever nearly killed you. Darren rubbed his chest, looking at his mother like she had completely lost her mind. I know I was extremely sick when I was a teenager. What does a childhood fever have to do with my kids right now? You are 100% sterile! Gloria screamed, her voice echoing loudly off the high ceilings of the luxury townhouse. You have an absolutely 0 sperm count, Darren. Azospermia. I have the detailed medical records locked securely inside my personal safe at home. The doctors told me clearly that you would never ever be able to father a biological child. I hid the paperwork because I did not want you to feel like less of a man growing up. I wanted to fiercely protect your masculine pride. The silence that followed her confession was absolute and suffocating. The only sound in the large room was the slow dripping of spilled cider falling from the edge of the coffee table onto the ruined rug. Darren stood completely frozen in place. The devastating words hung heavily in the air, wrapping around his throat like a tightening vice. Sterile. 100% 0 count. His mind raced backward through 5 miserable years of marriage to Zara. He vividly remembered the countless bitter arguments in this very living room. He remembered standing over Zara while she sat on this exact velvet sofa, crying silently over yet another negative pregnancy test. He remembered shouting at her, telling her she was broken, telling her she was too stressed and consumed by her auditing job to perform her basic duties as a wife and give him a family. He had flatly refused to ever step foot inside a fertility clinic himself, proudly claiming his manhood was perfectly intact and the problem was entirely her fault. And Zara had simply taken it. Zara had sat there and absorbed his relentless verbal abuse for 5 long years. But Zara was a brilliant senior financial auditor. Zara single-handedly managed their joint health insurance portal. Zara meticulously checked every medical code, every billing statement, every prescription history. The realization hit Darren like a speeding freight train. Zara knew. She had looked up his comprehensive childhood medical records through their insurance portal years ago. She had known the entire time that he was firing blanks. She had sat there day after day and let him scream at her about being a barren, useless woman, all while she quietly kept his humiliating medical secret to protect his extremely fragile ego. She had loved him deeply enough to bear the heavy public shame of their infertility, so he would not have to feel emasculated in front of his powerful business friends and his judgmental mother. And exactly how had he repaid her incredible loyalty? He had brought her treacherous best friend into their marital bed, impregnated her with another man's child, and bragged about creating a legendary family legacy. Darren slowly turned his head to look at Tasha. The normally confident and loud lifestyle influencer was currently backed up defensively against the wall near the hallway. Her expensive designer maternity dress suddenly looked like a tragic prison uniform. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably as she clutched her gold-plated smartphone tightly to her chest. "Who?" Darren demanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous guttural pitch that he barely recognized as his own. "Who is the real Father Tasha?" Tasha opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She looked wildly at Gloria, hoping the older woman would somehow intervene and save her. But Gloria was staring at Tasha with pure, unadulterated disgust. The proud church matriarch realized she had been completely played for a fool. She had just praised and blessed a child that did not carry a single drop of her precious family bloodline. The sheer embarrassment she would face at church if this got out was unthinkable. "Darren, baby." "Please," Tasha stammered, taking a terrified step away from him. "It is a beautiful miracle. It has to be a miracle from God above. The doctors back then must have been entirely wrong." "Do not you dare bring God into your filthy, disgusting lies," Gloria snapped, stepping aggressively toward Tasha. "My son is medically incapable of producing a child. You came slithering into this house pretending to carry a Vance heir just so you could secure the bag and steal his money. You are nothing but a deceptive, calculating parasite." Darren felt his chest heave with uncontrollable rage. The luxury townhouse, the startup company, the supposed legacy. It was all built on a massive, rotting foundation of lies. He had foolishly thrown away a brilliant, highly loyal wife for a deceptive woman who was blatantly using him to fund another man's offspring. He took a heavy step toward Tasha, his hands balled into tight, white-knuckled fists. He was going to make her tell him exactly whose babies she was carrying. He was going to completely tear her fake influencer life apart piece by piece. Before he could take another aggressive step, a sharp, loud ringing pierced the tense, suffocating air. Darren reached into his pocket out of pure habit. It was his personal cell phone. The caller ID brightly displayed the name of his primary wealth management bank. He ignored it completely, intending to step closer to the trembling Tasha. The phone rang again relentlessly, and then a second phone started ringing loudly. It was his dedicated business line resting on the marble kitchen counter across the room. Gloria grabbed his arm, pulling his attention away from his mistress. "Answer it right now, Darren. The bank does not call both of your lines simultaneously unless it is a severe financial emergency." Darren tore his furious eyes away from Tasha. He swiped the screen angrily and held the phone to his ear. "This is Darren Vance." "Mr. Vance," a stern, emotionless, corporate voice said on the other end of the line. "This is the primary fraud prevention department at Vanguard Financial. We are calling to formally inform you that effective 3 minutes ago, all of your personal and business accounts have been completely frozen. Darren felt the solid hardwood floor seemingly drop out from under his feet. Frozen? What the hell are you talking about? You cannot arbitrarily freeze my accounts. I am the CEO of Legacy Logistics. I have a massive payroll to process tomorrow morning. Your access is fully restricted, pending an active federal investigation. Mr. Vance, the banker, continued showing absolutely zero sympathy for his panic. We recently received a highly detailed 500-page auditing dossier outlining massive financial irregularities, unauthorized secondary mortgages, and severe wire fraud directly connected to your accounts. You currently have zero available funds. Have a good day. The line went dead with a hollow click. Darren stood paralyzed in the middle of the luxury townhouse holding a silent, useless phone to his ear. He had no loyal wife. He had no biological children. And now he had absolutely no money. Zara had not just walked away quietly in defeat. She had precisely detonated a massive bomb inside his life and securely locked all the doors from the outside. His entire life was finally over. Darren stared at the dead phone in his hand for exactly 3 seconds before pure primal panic set in. He did not say a single word to his mother, who was still trembling with rage. He did not spare a single glance for Tasha, who was weeping loudly against the hallway wall. He dropped the phone onto the ruined rug, bolted past the shattered crystal, and sprinted out the front door. He practically threw himself into his leased Maserati, hitting the ignition and tearing out of the driveway so fast the tires screamed against the pavement. He had to get to the bank. He had to fix this. It was just a misunderstanding. Zara was just playing a petty, vindictive game. He was the CEO of Legacy Logistics. He was a visionary. He could spin this. He had spun his way out of every financial hole he had ever dug. The drive to Vanguard Financial in downtown Atlanta was a blur of running red lights and near collisions. Darren gripped the leather steering wheel so tightly his hands ached. His mind raced frantically, trying to calculate exactly how much money he needed to pull out to keep his startup afloat through the end of the month. He just needed to access the primary business accounts. He would transfer the operational funds to an offshore account, clear out the joint savings, and leave Zara with nothing but the remaining utility bills. That was the original plan. Tasha and his brother Kevin had helped him strategize it for months. First secure the luxury house, then drain the cash, then serve Zara the divorce papers. Zara had simply beaten him to the punch by signing the documents first. But she could not possibly have touched the corporate funds. Those required dual authorization. Darren slammed his car into a restricted parking zone right outside the towering glass facade of Vanguard Financial. He did not bother feeding the meter. He burst through the heavy revolving doors, completely abandoning his usual polished corporate swagger. Sweat stained the collar of his designer polo shirt. He shoved his way past a line of waiting customers and marched directly up to the Platinum Services desk, slamming his hands down on the polished marble counter. "I need to speak with Marcus Sterling immediately," Darren demanded, his voice echoing loudly across the quiet lobby. "Tell him Darren Vance is here and it is a code-red corporate emergency." The young teller blinked, taken aback by his aggressive, unhinged demeanor. "Mr. Vance, I am sorry, but Mr. Sterling is currently on a conference call with our legal compliance team. If you would like to take a seat." "I am not taking a seat!" Darren roared, leaning over the marble counter. "I am a platinum-tier wealth management client. I am the CEO of Legacy Logistics. My accounts were just illegally frozen by some automated glitch, and I have a massive payroll to process tomorrow. You get Sterling out here right now, or I am pulling every single dime out of this institution." "You actually do not have a single dime left to pull out, Darren." The calm, authoritative voice came from directly behind him. Darren spun around. Marcus Sterling, the senior branch manager, stood there holding a massive thick binder bound in red tape. He did not look intimidated. He did not offer his usual obsequious handshake. He looked at Darren with the cold, clinical expression of a coroner examining a corpse. 2 uniformed bank security guards stood silently just a few feet behind him. "Marcus, what the hell is going on?" Darren demanded, marching up to the bank manager. "Your automated fraud department just locked me out of my own company." Zara must have reported my credit card stolen out of spite because we are getting a divorce. You need to override the lock right now. I need immediate access to my operational funds and the joint savings account." Mr. Sterling adjusted his glasses and gestured strictly toward his glass-walled office. "We need to step inside, Mr. Vance. Now." Darren felt a cold bead of sweat roll down his spine. The manager was not treating him like a VIP client. He was treating him like a hostile threat. Darren followed him into the office, the two security guards taking up positions directly outside the closed glass door. "Sit down," Sterling commanded. "I am not sitting down until you unfreeze my money," Darren snapped, pacing the length of the small office. "Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," Mr. Sterling replied, placing the massive red binder onto the center of his desk. "You are a man facing multiple federal wire fraud charges, and I highly suggest you lower your voice before I have security detain you for causing a public disturbance." Darren froze. The air in the room suddenly felt incredibly thin. Federal wire fraud. The words hit him like a physical blow to the chest. "What are you talking about?" Mr. Sterling opened the heavy binder. The first page was a highly detailed executive summary bearing the official letterhead of Zara's elite financial auditing firm. It was stamped with a terrifying red word: fraudulent. "Your soon-to-be ex-wife visited my office exactly 1 hour before she went home to sign your divorce papers." Mr. Sterling explained, his voice entirely devoid of pity. "She did not just come to separate her finances, Darren. She came to deliver a 500-page legally certified dossier documenting exactly how you have been funding legacy logistics for the past 18 months. Darren felt the blood drain completely from his face. His knees suddenly buckled, forcing him to collapse into the leather guest chair. Zara had audited him. His own wife, the woman he had dismissed as a boring, spreadsheet-obsessed corporate drone, had turned her ruthless professional skills onto his personal life. "She left me the house," Darren stammered, his voice shaking. "She signed the papers. She said I could keep the house and the legacy." Mr. Sterling let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "She did not leave you the house, Darren. She left you the debt. Zara removed her name from the property deed 3 weeks ago. She quietly transferred her equity entirely to you, which means you are now the sole owner of the massive second mortgage you secretly took out on that property." The walls of the office felt like they were closing in. Darren had taken out a second mortgage on their luxury townhouse a year ago to cover the bleeding losses at his failing startup. He had forged Zara's signature on the loan applications, knowing she would never agree to leverage their home. He thought he had covered his tracks perfectly. He thought she never checked the physical mail. Zara caught the forged signatures. Mr. Sterling continued tapping the heavy binder. "She brought in a forensic handwriting expert. She proved definitively that you committed felony fraud to secure a $500,000 loan against a jointly owned asset." But she did not stop there. "Zara is a senior corporate auditor, Darren. When she found one thread, she pulled the entire sweater completely apart." Mr. Sterling flipped to the next section of the massive binder. It was filled with highlighted bank statements, highlighted wire transfers, and highlighted corporate expense reports. "She audited legacy logistics." Mr. Sterling said, his voice dropping to a serious legal cadence. "She traced exactly where that $500,000 went. You did not invest it into your company infrastructure. You embezzled corporate funds to buy a brand new Mercedes G-Wagon. You wired $75,000 to a luxury jeweler for diamond Cartier sets. And you have been continuously funneling operational cash into a hidden offshore account under the name of a woman named Tasha." Darren could not breathe. He grabbed the arms of the leather chair, gasping for air. Zara knew everything. She knew about the affair. She knew about the embezzlement. She knew about the secret accounts. She had sat across from him at the dinner table for months, smiling politely while methodically compiling a federal criminal case against him. She had intentionally let him believe he was outsmarting her. She had let him bring Tasha into her home, let him wave those divorce papers in her face, knowing the entire time that she had already handed his head on a silver platter to the federal authorities. Because you used our banking institution to process these fraudulent wire transfers using forged credentials, we were legally obligated to freeze every single asset connected to your name, Mr. Sterling stated, closing the heavy binder with a definitive slam. The joint accounts are locked. The business accounts are locked. Your personal credit cards are canceled. We have already handed this entire dossier over to the FBI White-Collar Crime Division. They are currently seeking a warrant for your arrest. Darren jumped out of the chair, his chest heaving. You have to give me something. I need cash. I need to hire a defense attorney. I need to pay my employees tomorrow. You have absolutely nothing here, Mr. Vance, Mr. Sterling said, standing up and gesturing toward the door. Your startup is entirely bankrupt. Your house is in immediate default, and you are a liability to this bank. You need to leave my office right now before I call the local police. Darren stumbled backward, blindly hitting the glass door. He turned and practically ran out of the bank, sprinting past the security guards and bursting out into the humid city air. He felt like he was drowning. His entire reality had been dismantled in less than 2 hours. He had no house. He had no startup. He was sterile. His mistress was lying to him, and he was going to federal prison. He pulled out his phone, his hands shaking so violently he could barely unlock the screen. He needed a lifeline. He needed someone who knew how to handle this exact kind of chaotic mess. He dialed the only person left in his corner, his younger brother, Kevin. Kevin was a slick, fast-talking former college athlete who ran a sports agency downtown. Kevin always had cash. Kevin always knew a guy. Kevin was the one who had introduced him to the offshore banking contact in the first place. The phone rang 4 times before picking up. The loud, thumping bass of a day club played in the background. "What is up, big bro?" Kevin answered, his voice smooth and entirely unbothered. "Tell me you finally dropped the dead weight and got the house." "Kevin, listen to me," Darren gasped, pacing frantically back and forth on the sidewalk outside the bank. "I am in massive trouble. Zara knew. She knew everything. She audited my entire life, Kevin. She handed a massive file over to Vanguard. They froze everything. The corporate accounts, the personal savings, everything. They are calling the FBI. I am completely locked out." The loud music in the background suddenly sounded very far away. The line went deadly silent for 3 agonizing seconds. Kevin Darren pleaded, his voice cracking with pure desperation. "I need a loan. Just $100,000 to get a criminal defense lawyer on retainer. I need to get out of the city. You have to front me the cash, bro. I am your flesh and blood." "Darren," Kevin said, his voice suddenly cold, calculating, and entirely devoid of brotherly love. "You got caught. That is your mess, not mine. I told you not to leave a paper trail." "Kevin, you helped me set up those offshore accounts," Darren shouted, ignoring the stares of pedestrians walking by. "You told me to leverage the house. You have to help me." "I do not have to do anything," Kevin replied, his tone turning completely ruthless. "My agency is my priority. I am not catching a federal wire fraud charge because you could not keep your own wife under control. Do not call this number again." "Kevin, wait!" Darren screamed into the receiver. But there was no answer. The line went dead with a hollow click. Kevin had hung up. Darren lowered the phone from his ear, staring blankly at the dark screen. The busy Atlanta traffic roared past him, but he could not hear a single sound. The financial ambush was complete. He was entirely isolated, stripped of every single resource he had ever claimed to own. And worst of all, Zara had not even raised her voice to do it. The only person left to blame, the only person he could physically reach, was the woman sitting in his living room, currently claiming to carry his miraculous twin boys. He slammed his expensive Italian leather shoe on the gas pedal, tearing back toward the luxury townhouse. He ignored red lights and stop signs, swerving aggressively through the busy Atlanta traffic. His mind was a violent, chaotic storm of betrayed ego and sheer, blinding panic. His entire life was built on strategic leverage. He had leveraged the house, he had leveraged the startup business, he had leveraged his marriage. Zara was supposed to be the silent, invisible foundation that held it all securely up. She was the one who managed the boring, tedious details, the taxes, the health insurance, the heavy mortgage payments. He had always openly mocked her for being so meticulous, so pathetically obsessed with the fine print. Now that fine print was a heavy steel noose tightening rapidly around his throat. If he was 100% sterile, then the entire premise of this divorce was a humiliating farce. Tasha had completely played him. Tasha had looked him directly in the eye, gladly accepted the diamond. Cartier jewelry, happily driven the expensive Mercedes G-Wagon, and promised him a powerful generational legacy while carrying another man's DNA. He had to know who the real father was. He had to drag the ugly truth out of her before the FBI kicked his door down. He practically kicked the heavy front door off its hinges when he arrived. The mahogany door slammed violently against the drywall, leaving a deep visible dent in the pristine paint. Darren marched heavily across the hardwood floor, ignoring the shattered crystal and sticky cider still pooling dangerously on the expensive rug. Tasha was standing in the kitchen completely unbothered. She had already opened a pristine package of expensive baby clothes. Tiny designer blue onesies were spread neatly across the white marble island. The sickening sight of them made Darren's stomach violently churn. He marched directly over, swept his heavy arm aggressively across the counter, and sent the designer clothes and the glass of sparkling water she was holding flying onto the floor. The glass shattered loudly, adding to the chaotic mess of the townhouse. "Whose kids are these?" Darren roared, his voice cracking with raw, unhinged desperation. He planted his hands firmly on the marble counter, trapping her against the expensive stainless steel refrigerator. "Do not you dare lie to me, Tasha. My mother has the original medical records. I had a severe infection when I was a teenager. I am completely 100% sterile. I cannot have children. I have never been able to have children. So tell me whose babies are growing inside you." Tasha backed up, pressing her spine tightly against the cold metal of the refrigerator. She stared at him, and for one brief, fleeting second, her carefully curated influencer mask slipped completely off. Darren saw pure, unadulterated panic flash wildly in her eyes. She knew she was caught. She knew the lucrative golden ticket she had been eagerly banking on was suddenly completely worthless. But Tasha had not successfully built an audience of 2 million devoted followers by surrendering to objective reality. She was a master of narrative manipulation. She rapidly evaluated the threat. She quickly realized Darren was frantic, sweating, and clearly had nothing left to offer her. She took a deep, calculated breath, forced her lower lip to tremble pathetically, and let a single perfect, tragic tear roll down her cheek. Darren stepped back. She whimpered, her voice suddenly incredibly fragile and terrified. "You are scaring me. You are having a severe mental breakdown." Darren scoffed, waving his arms wildly in the air. "A breakdown? I am completely broke, Tasha." Zara froze. "Absolutely everything. The bank, the business, the joint savings, all of it. Vanguard just called me to say the FBI is actively looking for me. And you are standing here carrying another man's kids, pretending they are my heirs. I want to know exactly who the father is right now." Instead of answering his desperate question, Tasha reached swiftly into the pocket of her designer maternity dress and pulled out her gold-plated smartphone. In one smooth, highly practiced motion, she hit a button on her screen and hoisted the phone high into the air, angling the camera perfectly to capture both her tear-stained, terrified face and Darren's aggressive, looming posture. She went live. "You guys, I need an emergency prayer warrior circle right now," Tasha cried directly into the camera, her voice echoing loudly and pitifully in the quiet kitchen. "I am so incredibly scared right now. My partner Darren is having a severe psychotic break. He is screaming at me and physically attacking me in our home." Darren lunged forward, trying to snatch the phone out of her hand, but Tasha expertly spun out of his reach, keeping the camera perfectly framed on her tragic performance. "Please, someone call the police," she sobbed hysterically to her thousands of active live viewers. His bitter ex-wife, Zara, could not handle the fact that we are building a beautiful, loving family together. Zara is a high-level corporate auditor, and she illegally hacked into Darren's private medical files out of pure jealous spite. She maliciously manipulated his health records to make him think he is sterile just to destroy his mind and ruin our baby's lives. Darren froze completely paralyzed by the sheer audacity of her lies. He stared at the tiny glowing screen in her hand. Thousands of angry comments were already rapidly flooding the live feed. People were aggressively calling him a monster, a dangerous psychopath, an abusive partner. Tasha was effortlessly rewriting reality in real time. She was brilliantly weaponizing her massive social media platform to turn his personal financial nightmare into her ultimate victim survival story. Zara is a criminal hacker. Tasha wept, wiping her perfectly mascaraed eyes for the camera. She wants to see a strong black family fail. She wants to see me lose my precious twin boys because she was too broken and obsessed with her job to have her own children. She broke his mind, you guys. He does not even know what is real anymore. Before Darren could lunge again and forcefully rip the phone away, the front door of the townhouse swung wide open. Gloria marched heavily into the kitchen, her breath ragged and her peach church suit slightly wrinkled from her frantic drive back. She had realized she left her designer purse in the living room and returned just in time to witness the chaotic scene. Darren felt a sudden, massive rush of relief. His mother was finally here. His mother had the actual physical medical records securely locked in her safe. His mother knew the absolute, undeniable truth about his condition, and she would shut this manipulative internet circus down instantly. "Mom, tell her," Darren pleaded, pointing a violently shaking finger at Tasha's glowing phone. "Tell her delusional followers the actual truth. Tell them about the hospital, about the terrible infection I had. Tell them Zara had absolutely nothing to do with my medical history. Tell them I am sterile." Gloria stopped dead in her tracks in the middle of the kitchen. She looked at her sons, sweating, frantic, and completely unhinged. She looked at the shattered glass and the ruined baby clothes scattered across the floor. Then she looked directly at the glowing red live indicator on Tasha's phone screen, showing over 70,000 active viewers. Gloria was a senior deaconess. Her entire valuable social currency in Atlanta relied heavily on maintaining the flawless, pristine image of a highly successful, heavily blessed family. She instantly recognized the names of several prominent women from her mega church, commenting rapidly on the live feed. If she admitted on a highly public live stream that her golden, successful son was actually sterile, completely bankrupt, and currently under federal investigation for wire fraud, her beloved reputation would be permanently and completely destroyed. She would be the pathetic laughingstock of her wealthy congregation. The elite social circles she ruthlessly dominated would turn their backs on her by Sunday morning service. Gloria did not hesitate for a single second. She smoothly walked past her desperate, pleading son and placed a highly comforting, deeply maternal arm around Tasha's shaking shoulders. She looked directly into the camera lens, effortlessly projecting the calm, authoritative grace of a devoted church mother, protecting her flock. "Tasha is telling the absolute truth," Gloria announced, her voice projecting perfectly across the kitchen. "My son is clearly suffering from severe, overwhelming stress and a terrible mental episode brought on by his vindictive, jealous ex-wife. The medical records he is shouting about were nothing but a minor clerical misunderstanding from many years ago. Zara maliciously twisted that old, forgotten paperwork to torture this poor, innocent pregnant woman and violently destroy my son's joy." Darren felt the air forcefully leave his lungs. His own mother. The woman who had just aggressively screamed at Tasha 30 minutes ago. The woman who had locked his sterile diagnosis in a heavy safe for decades was now publicly throwing him entirely under the bus, just to protect her fragile, pathetic social standing. She would rather blatantly gaslight her own flesh and blood on the internet than publicly admit her family was a complete failure. Tasha leaned her head heavily against Gloria's shoulder, sniffing delicately and tragically for the camera. "We are going to get Darren the deep psychiatric help he so desperately needs right now," Tasha whispered bravely to her followers. "But right now I just need to focus on protecting my unborn twins. Thank you for deeply supporting our family during this terrible spiritual attack." Darren stood in his ruined kitchen, completely silenced by the overwhelming, devastating force of their combined deception. He was entirely trapped in a nightmare of his own making, utterly outplayed by every single woman he had ever arrogantly tried to manipulate. Across town, high above the chaotic, noisy Atlanta traffic, Zara sat comfortably behind the massive mahogany desk in her pristine corner office. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning, commanding panoramic view of the financial district she was rapidly conquering. Her sleek tablet was propped up neatly next to her customized gold keyboard, silently playing Tasha's hysterical, dramatic live stream. Zara watched Gloria wrap her protective arm around the deceptive mistress. She watched Darren stand there looking completely broken, entirely isolated, and utterly defeated by his own toxic family dynamics. Zara did not feel angry. She did not feel vindictive or petty. She felt perfectly, beautifully balanced. She picked up her customized gold mouse, clicked calmly on her secure email application, and hit send on a highly confidential legal document she had meticulously prepared weeks ago. She looked up at her executive assistant, who was standing quietly and professionally by the heavy oak door, holding a fresh steaming cup of artisan coffee. Let the executive board members know the aggressive acquisition of Legacy Logistics is officially complete, Zara said, her voice incredibly smooth and radiating pure, absolute authority. And tell the front lobby security team to prepare themselves. We are about to have a very desperate, very aggressive visitor. Darren practically tore the steering wheel of his leased Maserati off its mounting column as he swerved recklessly through the congested downtown Atlanta traffic. His brain was misfiring wildly, struggling to process the absolute catastrophe unfolding around him. His mother had publicly and ruthlessly betrayed him. Tasha had orchestrated a psychotic internet spectacle to paint him as a violent, unhinged villain. His personal and business bank accounts were frozen solid by federal authorities. But he still had one final card left to play. He was Darren Vance. He was the charismatic, visionary founder of Legacy Logistics. He just needed to get into a room with his venture capital board. He could sell ice to a polar bear. He could definitely sell a temporary liquidity crisis to a group of billionaire investors who already had millions of dollars tied up in his success. He slammed the expensive sports car into a commercial loading zone right outside the towering glass and steel headquarters of Apex Ventures. He did not care about the blaring horns or the parking enforcement officer shouting loudly at him from the curb. He sprinted through the heavy revolving doors, his Italian leather shoes slipping slightly on the polished marble floor of the lobby. He marched directly toward the private executive elevators, completely ignoring the security desk and the receptionist calling his name. He swiped his CEO access badge against the scanner. The light flashed green and the door slid open. He was still in the system. That meant he still had time. He rode the elevator to the penthouse floor, adjusting his sweat-stained designer collar and trying to practice his pitch. "Gentlemen, we have a slight operational emergency, a minor banking glitch, a temporary freeze. I need a $500,000 bridge loan to cover payroll and operations through the end of the quarter." It was simple. It was just business. The silver elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Darren marched down the thick plush carpet of the executive hallway. He could see the silhouettes of the senior partners through the frosted glass walls of the primary boardroom. Richard Sterling, the lead investor who had championed his initial Series A funding, was sitting near the window. Darren pushed the heavy double doors open with a forceful, dramatic shove, plastering on his most confident, arrogant smile. "Richard, I need an emergency meeting right now," Darren announced, striding boldly into the room. "We have a massive banking issue and I need an immediate capital injection to keep the lights on." The words died instantly in his throat. The 6 senior partners of Apex Ventures were indeed seated around the massive polished mahogany table, but none of them were looking at him. They were all looking deferentially toward the oversized leather chairman chair at the head of the table. The chair was turned slightly toward the panoramic window, overlooking the sprawling city skyline. Slowly, the heavy leather chair swiveled around. Zara sat there. She looked completely immaculate. Her tailored charcoal suit was flawless without a single wrinkle. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant knot. A sleek gold pen rested lightly between her fingers, and a stack of heavily redacted legal files sat neatly in front of her. She looked at him with the cold, clinical expression of an apex predator observing trapped, wounded prey. "What the hell is this?" Darren demanded, his voice dropping into a confused, breathless rasp. "What are you doing in my boardroom, Zara?" Zara did not flinch. She did not raise her voice. She simply smiled a cold, razor-sharp smile that made the hairs on the back of Darren's neck stand straight up. "This is not your boardroom, Darren, and it is certainly no longer your company." Darren let out a harsh, frantic laugh, looking wildly at the venture capital partners seated around the table. "Richard," he pleaded, looking directly at his lead investor. "Tell my crazy ex-wife to get out of here. We have serious corporate business to discuss. The bank froze my accounts due to a technical glitch. I need an emergency bridge loan of $500,000 right now, or Legacy Logistics misses payroll tomorrow morning." Richard, an older, distinguished man with silver hair, adjusted his expensive silk tie and looked at Darren with profound, absolute disgust. "We do not issue loans to criminals, Darren, and we certainly do not do business with men who brazenly embezzle our capital to fund their mistresses." Darren felt the blood drain entirely from his face, leaving him cold and lightheaded. How did they know? How could they possibly know? He turned his panicked, wide eyes back to Zara. "Let me clarify the current corporate structure for you, Darren, since you always struggled with basic financial literacy," Zara said, her tone clipped and completely professional. "When I audited your personal life and uncovered your massive secondary mortgage fraud, I did not just hand that information over to the federal authorities. I also brought it directly here to your investors. I showed them exactly how you have been bleeding this startup dry for 18 months. They were understandably furious. They were fully prepared to completely dissolve the company, fire everyone, and absorb the total financial loss." Darren gripped the edge of the mahogany table, his knuckles turning stark white. "You had no right to look at those files. You stole my private data." "I protected my own legal liability," Zara corrected smoothly. "But more importantly, I recognized an incredibly lucrative business opportunity. The core logistics software your engineers built is actually quite brilliant. It was only failing because the CEO was treating the operational budget like a personal limitless ATM. So I made Apex Ventures an offer to salvage their investment." Darren shook his head violently, refusing to comprehend the words coming out of her mouth. "What offer? What are you talking about?" "My firm quietly bought out all of your corporate debt," Zara stated the words, ringing out like a judge delivering a fatal, unappealable sentence. "I purchased every single outstanding share from these gentlemen at a highly favorable discount. As of 20 minutes ago, the aggressive acquisition was officially finalized. I am now the sole majority shareholder of Legacy Logistics. I own your company, Darren. I own the software. I own the patents. I own everything." The sheer impossibility of the situation struck Darren like a physical blow to the stomach. The startup was his entire identity. It was his leverage, his legacy, his absolute proof that he was a self-made giant. He slammed both hands down hard on the heavy table, leaning aggressively toward Zara. "You cannot do this!" he screamed, his voice cracking with raw, unhinged fury. "You cannot just steal my company. This is my blood, sweat, and tears. I built this place from nothing. I grinded for years to get this off the ground. You cannot take my legacy." Zara's expression hardened into pure, absolute ice. She picked up a heavy black ledger from the top of her files and slid it forcefully across the polished mahogany table. It stopped perfectly right in front of Darren's shaking hands. "Your blood and sweat," Zara repeated, her voice laced with venomous, lethal calm. "Let us look at exactly what your blood and sweat purchased, Darren. Because according to this forensic audit, you used $200,000 of company funds to buy a brand new Mercedes G-Wagon for a woman named Tasha. You used $50,000 of investor capital to purchase diamond Cartier sets. You expensed romantic getaways, luxury hotel suites, and massive offshore wire transfers, all while looking your incredibly hardworking employees in the eye and telling them that the company was too broke to afford their annual holiday bonuses. Darren stared blindly at the highlighted lines in the open ledger. His secret life was laid completely bare, illuminated in bright fluorescent yellow ink for every powerful man in the room to see. The offshore accounts, the jewelry receipts, the car payments. She had found absolutely everything. "You are a parasite." Darren Zara continued, her voice echoing sharply in the silent boardroom. "You built absolutely nothing. You manipulated investors, you lied to your wife, and you stole from your own employees to fund a pathetic, cheap illusion of wealth. The only thing you successfully manufactured was your own spectacular ruin." Darren tried to speak, but his throat was completely dry. He looked at Richard, begging silently for intervention, but the older man simply turned his leather chair away, refusing to even make eye contact. The other board members stared at him with open, unmasked contempt. He was completely radioactive. He was a walking federal indictment. As the new majority shareholder and acting chairwoman of the board, "My very first official order of business is cleaning house," Zara announced, standing up slowly and smoothing the front of her tailored suit. "Darren Vance, you are officially terminated as Chief Executive Officer of Legacy Logistics, effective immediately. You are stripped of all corporate privileges, all access to company assets, and all equity options." "You cannot fire me from my own company," Darren roared, launching himself forward over the table. "I will sue you. I will drag you through court for the next 10 years. I will destroy you, Zara." Right on cue, the heavy oak doors of the boardroom swung open behind him. Two massive security guards dressed in crisp black suits stepped quickly into the room. They did not wait for an invitation. They grabbed Darren firmly by the arms, their grips like iron vices digging deeply into his tailored sleeves. "Get your hands off me," Darren shouted, struggling violently against their hold. "I am the CEO. You cannot touch me. I will have you all arrested." "Escort Mr. Vance off the premises," Zara instructed the guards, her tone completely, utterly bored. "And ensure his face is flagged at the front desk. He is permanently banned from entering this building." The guards began to forcefully drag Darren backward toward the open doors. His Italian leather shoes scrambled uselessly against the thick carpet. He was thrashing, screaming curses, fighting like a cornered, desperate animal. The sophisticated, polished corporate executive was entirely gone, replaced by a pathetic, broken man throwing a highly public tantrum. "Wait," Zara said softly, raising a single manicured hand. The guards paused, holding a heavily breathing Darren in the doorway. Zara walked slowly around the massive mahogany table. Her heels clicked rhythmically against the floorboards, echoing like a ticking clock. She stopped just inches away from him. She could smell the sour, desperate sweat radiating from his skin. She looked at his panicked, wide eyes and felt a deep, profound sense of closure. She had not just beaten him. She had completely, legally, and systematically dismantled him. Darren glared at her, his chest heaving rapidly. "You think you won?" he spat out venomously. "You think you took everything? You are nothing but a bitter, barren woman." Zara did not flinch at the cruel, desperate insult. She simply smiled, leaning in close, so only he could hear her next words. The scent of her expensive perfume filled his senses, completely overpowering him. "By the way, Darren," she whispered, her voice dripping with dangerous secret knowledge, "when you finally stop crying about losing your company and your fake twins, you might want to give your beloved brother a call." Darren stopped struggling immediately. His brother, Kevin, the brother who had just ruthlessly hung up on him 10 minutes ago. The brother who had flatly refused to loan him a single dime for a defense attorney. What about Kevin? Darren rasped his heart, suddenly hammering a chaotic new rhythm against his ribs. Zara tilted her head, her smile widening into something truly terrifying. "You should ask your loyal brother Kevin exactly how he afforded that gorgeous brand-new luxury condo downtown," Zara whispered softly. "Ask him who paid the massive cash down payment. And while you are at it, ask Tasha who was actually driving her new G-Wagon while you were busy playing CEO." Darren felt the entire world drop completely out from under his feet. The final horrific pieces rapidly snapped together in his mind. Kevin's sudden influx of unexplained cash, Kevin's total refusal to help him, Kevin's constant lingering presence at the townhouse whenever Darren was traveling for business. The baby twins. No, Darren gasped the word tearing out of his throat like a jagged piece of glass. No, you are lying. You are lying. Zara stepped back smoothly, adjusting the lapels of her suit jacket. Her eyes were completely dead. Throw him out, she commanded. The guards yanked Darren backward forcefully, dragging him out of the boardroom and down the long, brightly lit hallway. His screams echoed loudly off the glass walls, a chaotic, terrible mix of pure rage and total psychological devastation. He had lost his wife. He had lost his company. He had lost his freedom. And now, thanks to Zara's final brilliant strike, he realized he had lost the only two people he thought were actually on his side. He was entirely, totally alone. Darren was forcefully shoved through the heavy revolving doors of the Apex Ventures building, stumbling out onto the sun-baked concrete sidewalk. His expensive Italian suit jacket was severely rumpled, and his designer tie hung loosely around his sweating neck. He scrambled blindly toward the commercial loading zone, where his leased Maserati was still illegally parked. A bright neon orange parking ticket was slapped firmly under the windshield wiper, but Darren did not care. He aggressively tore the paper away, crumpled it into a tight, useless ball, and tossed it directly into the street gutter. He collapsed heavily into the driver's seat, slamming his shaking fists against the leather steering wheel in a fit of blinding, uncontrollable rage. Zara had orchestrated a masterful, flawless corporate execution. She had taken his company, his money, and his professional reputation in one single swift motion. But the final terrifying nail in the coffin, the ultimate stab to his fragile ego, was the parting revelation she had whispered about his own brother. He keyed the ignition, the powerful engine roaring to life, and peeled away from the curb. His tires screeched violently against the asphalt, leaving dark black marks behind. He headed straight for Midtown Atlanta, where his younger brother Kevin lived in a sprawling, luxury high-rise condominium. Darren gripped the steering wheel so tightly, his knuckles turned entirely white, his mind a chaotic whirlwind of denial and terrifying suspicion. Zara had to be lying. She was just trying to completely break his spirit, playing a cruel psychological game to finish him off. Kevin was his own blood. Kevin would never betray him like that. Darren slammed his car into the VIP underground parking garage of the high-rise. He knew the building intimately. He knew the layout, the security patrols, and most importantly, the private elevator bypass code. He had secretly helped Kevin secure the lavish penthouse apartment 18 months ago, quietly utilizing corporate funds to guarantee the massive loan. Darren bypassed the front concierge desk, entirely slipping through a side service entrance and riding the private elevator directly up to the top floor. His heart pounded relentlessly against his ribs. He stepped out into the quiet, opulent hallway and marched up to Kevin's heavy double doors. He punched the 6-digit entry code into the electronic keypad. The lock clicked green and the heavy doors unlatched with a soft, mechanical hum. Darren pushed his way inside, fully expecting to confront his brother immediately, but the massive penthouse was completely silent. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking, unobstructed view of the sprawling Atlanta skyline, but Darren did not spare it a single glance. He marched straight down the hallway and turned into the sprawling, open-concept kitchen. Then he saw it. Resting casually on the massive white marble kitchen island was a pristine, bright orange Hermes Birkin bag. It was the exact same highly exclusive, painfully expensive bag Darren had purchased for Tasha just 3 months ago to celebrate their pregnancy announcement. His breath caught sharply in his throat. He took a slow, trembling step forward. Lying right next to the designer handbag were 2 distinct plush crimson velvet boxes. Cartier. Darren reached out with shaking fingers and flipped the lid of the first box open. A stunning diamond tennis bracelet glittered brightly under the expensive modern pendant lights. It was the exact jewelry set Zara had just shown him in the corporate ledger, the items he had illegally expensed through legacy logistics. The undeniable physical proof hit Darren like a speeding freight train. He inhaled deeply, and the lingering scent of Tasha's signature expensive vanilla perfume hung heavily in the air of his brother's kitchen. It was not a lie. It was not a vicious corporate manipulation. His mistress, the woman supposedly carrying the next glorious generation of the Vance Empire, was practically living in his younger brother's apartment. The loud metallic sound of a key turning in the front door suddenly shattered the heavy silence. Darren spun around just as Kevin strolled casually into the penthouse foyer. Kevin was wearing a tight athletic shirt and designer sweatpants, looking fresh and completely unbothered after a morning gym session. He was whistling a low, cheerful tune, spinning his keys around his index finger. When he looked up and saw Darren standing perfectly still in the center of his kitchen, the cheerful whistling stopped instantly. Kevin dropped his keys. They clattered loudly against the polished hardwood floor. "What the hell are you doing in my house, Darren?" Darren let out a low, guttural growl that sounded barely human. He did not say a single word. He simply lunged. He charged across the expensive living room, clearing the open space in 3 massive strides, and tackled his younger brother with the desperate, violent force of a wild animal. The 2 grown men crashed heavily into an expensive glass console table, shattering it into 1,000 jagged, dangerous pieces. Darren swung his fist, blindly connecting hard with Kevin's jaw, sending a spray of blood across the white walls. "You treacherous, lying snake!" Darren screamed, his voice tearing his vocal cords as he swung his fist again. "I gave you everything. I trusted you." Kevin let out a sharp grunt of pain, but his athletic reflexes kicked in instantly. He was younger, stronger, and in significantly better shape than his corporate brother. Kevin grabbed Darren firmly by the collar of his ruined suit jacket, twisted his core body weight, and violently flipped their positions. He pinned Darren forcefully to the hardwood floor, driving his heavy knee directly into Darren's chest. Darren gasped loudly as the air was forcefully knocked entirely out of his lungs. "Get off me!" Darren choked, thrashing wildly beneath his brother's heavy, unbreakable grip. "If I am sterile, Kevin, whose kids are those? Tell me the truth right now. If I cannot have children, whose babies is Tasha carrying?" Kevin did not look remorseful. He did not look remotely guilty. He casually wiped a small smear of blood from his split lip and looked down at his older brother with an expression of pure, arrogant superiority. He let out a dark, highly amused laugh that echoed cruelly across the shattered living room. "Are you seriously just figuring this out?" Kevin mocked, his voice dripping with absolute condescension. "You were always too busy playing the big boss, Darren. You were always running around town pretending to be the unstoppable king of Atlanta, obsessing over your fake startup and your fake wealth. You ignored her. Tasha needed a real man. She needed someone who could actually satisfy her while you were busy playing corporate dress-up." Darren thrashed harder, his vision going completely red with sheer, blinding fury. "You got her pregnant! You stole my legacy!" "There is no legacy." Kevin laughed loudly, pressing his knee down even harder into Darren's sternum. "You have been firing blanks since you were 15, bro. Those twin boys growing inside her right now. Those are mine. They have always been mine. We played you, Darren. We played you perfectly. Tasha secured the bag, and I secured the future. You were nothing but a convenient, highly gullible ATM." The devastating words shredded whatever remaining sanity Darren had left. He screamed a raw, agonizing sound of complete defeat. His own brother had successfully orchestrated his absolute humiliation. "Darren, Kevin, stop this instantly." The sharp, horrified shriek cut through the violent tension like a swinging blade. Kevin snapped his head up, releasing his tight grip slightly. Darren gasped for air, turning his bruised face toward the entryway. Gloria stood paralyzed in the open doorway of the penthouse. Her tailored peach church suit was immaculate, but her face was a portrait of pure, unadulterated shock. She held a covered glass casserole dish in her hands, completely frozen in place. She had driven straight to Kevin's apartment after leaving the disastrous scene at Darren's townhouse, desperate to seek comfort from her younger golden son. She had quietly let herself in with her spare key, expecting a peaceful refuge. Instead, she had walked directly into a blood-soaked nightmare. She had heard absolutely everything. The brutal confession, The mocking laughter, the undeniable horrifying revelation that her precious twin grandsons were the product of a deeply deceitful, treacherous affair between her youngest son and her eldest son's mistress. "Mom," Kevin stammered, quickly scrambling off Darren and standing up. His arrogant, confident swagger completely vanished, replaced instantly by the terrified demeanor of a guilty child caught red-handed. "Mom, it is not what you think." The heavy glass casserole dish slipped directly through Gloria's trembling fingers. It hit the hardwood floor with a sickening crash, sending baked pasta and shattered glass flying across the elegant foyer. Gloria stared wildly between her two sons. The flawless, deeply respected Vance family image she had ruthlessly maintained for decades at their prominent mega-church was not just cracking, it was entirely obliterated. "You!" Gloria whispered, pointing a shaking, manicured finger at Kevin. "You slept with that deceptive parasite. You brought this filthy, disgusting sin into our family. She was going to leave him anyway, Mom," Kevin argued, taking a defensive step backward. "Darren is completely broke. Zara took everything. He is going to federal prison. Tasha and I actually love each other. We are going to raise those boys together." Gloria placed a hand heavily over her heart, staggering backward until her shoulders hit the wall. Her golden boys, her flawless legacy. One a sterile, bankrupt criminal. The other a treacherous, backstabbing adulterer. The absolute public shame she would face when this highly radioactive scandal inevitably leaked to their massive congregation would be completely unsurvivable. She opened her mouth to scream at both of them to banish them from her sight forever. But before Gloria could utter a single word, 3 loud, forceful knocks pounded aggressively against the open front door frame. Everyone in the ruined penthouse froze. Kevin turned around, his fists still clenched. Gloria pressed herself flat against the entryway wall. Darren slowly, painfully dragged himself up from the floor, spitting a mouthful of blood onto the ruined rug. Standing in the doorway were 2 heavily armed Fulton County Sheriff's deputies. They looked completely unfazed by the shattered glass, the bloody faces, or the highly tense atmosphere. They were strictly there to do a job. Kevin Vance, the lead deputy, asked, his voice a booming, authoritative baritone. Kevin swallowed hard, wiping his bleeding lip again. "Yes, that is me. What is going on here? If someone called about a noise complaint, it is fine. We were just having a minor family disagreement." "We are not here for a noise complaint, Mr. Vance," the deputy stated. He pulled a thick, folded legal document from his heavy-duty utility belt and shoved it directly into Kevin's chest. Kevin grabbed the papers instinctively, looking down at the bold black lettering. "We are here to serve an official order to vacate the premises." The deputy continued, his hand resting casually near his radio. "This property has been fully foreclosed upon and officially repossessed by the primary lien holder. You have exactly 30 minutes to gather your personal belongings and exit the building, or you will be physically arrested for criminal trespassing." Kevin stared blankly at the legal notice. "Foreclosed." "That is completely impossible," he shouted, waving the papers frantically. "I own this place. My sports agency brings in millions. The mortgage is fully paid. There must be some kind of massive clerical mistake." "There is no mistake," the deputy replied, stepping fully into the apartment. "The mortgage on this luxury property was originally co-signed and guaranteed by a corporate entity known as Legacy Logistics." Darren felt his stomach completely drop. He had secretly used his company's leverage to quietly co-sign Kevin's massive multi-million-dollar mortgage, heavily manipulating the corporate books to hide the liability from his venture capital investors. As of this morning, the deputy continued reading strictly from his official clipboard. Legacy Logistics was fully acquired by a new majority shareholder. The new owner immediately executed a comprehensive financial audit and liquidated all fraudulent, unauthorized corporate assets. Since company funds were illegally utilized to secure this mortgage, the new owner has claimed full immediate possession of this property to recoup corporate losses. Kevin slowly turned his horrified eyes toward Darren. Darren could not even speak. The absolute ruthless precision of Zara's vengeance was truly terrifying. She had not just targeted him, She had systematically targeted every single person who had ever helped him, enabled him, or profited from his deception. Who? Kevin whispered, his voice shaking with pure terror. Who is the new owner? The deputy checked his paperwork one final time. A woman named Zara Vance. She left a specific message for you. She said to tell you that she hopes you and your brother enjoy the reality of your actual net worth. Now grab your things, gentlemen. Your time is officially up. The massive crystal chandeliers of Greater Grace Fellowship cast a brilliant warm glow over 3,000 impeccably dressed attendees the following Sunday morning. The megachurch was the epicenter of elite social power in Atlanta. Deals were brokered in the pews, reputations were forged in the lobby, and status was everything. Gloria Vance sat squarely in the prestigious front row, her spiritual armor firmly in place. She wore a somber navy suit, holding a lace handkerchief tightly in her manicured hands. Tasha sat pressed closely beside her, rubbing her swollen belly with a practiced rhythmic motion. They had spent the last 48 hours doing absolute desperate damage control. Kevin was homeless. Darren was a fugitive from his own life. The Vance empire was entirely in ashes, but Gloria refused to surrender her social crown. She knew whoever controlled the narrative controlled the community. When Pastor Williams opened the floor for the morning testimony and community prayer segment, Gloria stood up immediately. She smoothed her skirt, tilted her chin upward, and accepted the wireless microphone from an usher. She took a deep, trembling breath, forcing a single tragic tear to roll down her cheek. Church family, I stand before you today with a heavy, grieving heart. Gloria began, her voice echoing sorrowfully through the massive state-of-the-art sound system. Our family is currently enduring a vicious, ungodly spiritual attack. My eldest son Darren has been the victim of a malicious, hostile corporate takeover. His business, his life's work, his very home has been illegally seized by his ex-wife Zara. A shocked collective murmur rippled through the expansive sanctuary. People leaned forward, completely captivated by the unfolding scandal. Gloria pressed the handkerchief to her eyes, playing the devastated matriarch to absolute perfection. Zara is a deeply bitter, barren woman, she cried, her voice rising with manufactured righteous indignation. She could not give my son a family. She could not bless him with a generational legacy. And out of pure, toxic jealousy, she has hacked his financial records, locked his bank accounts, and thrown this innocent pregnant woman out into the cold. Gloria placed a protective maternal hand on Tasha's shoulder. Tasha kept her head bowed, dabbing at her dry eyes and looking incredibly fragile. She wants to destroy a beautiful, successful black family because she is too broken to build one herself. Gloria shouted, her voice vibrating with aggressive theatrical passion. She wants to starve these innocent unborn twins out of pure spite. I am asking my prayer warriors today to stand with us. Pray against this wickedness. Pray against this jealous woman trying to dismantle my son's magnificent legacy. Amens and shouts of support erupted from the congregation. The elite women of the deaconess board nodded sympathetically, casting sorrowful glances at Tasha's pregnant belly. Gloria felt a massive surge of triumphant adrenaline. She was winning. She was successfully painting Zara as a ruthless, unhinged monster. Then the massive, heavy oak doors at the very back of the sanctuary swung wide open. The bright morning sunlight spilled into the dark carpeted foyer, illuminating the silhouette of a woman. Zara stepped through the threshold. She did not look bitter. She did not look broken. She looked completely, dangerously immaculate. She was wearing a flawless, razor-sharp tailored white suit. The stark, brilliant white fabric commanded absolute attention, radiating pure, undeniable authority. She held a sleek designer clutch in one hand, and her posture was completely relaxed. The loud, supportive shouts from the congregation began to aggressively falter. The amens died in the air, rapidly replaced by a dense, suffocating silence. 3,000 pairs of eyes turned away from Gloria's tearful performance and locked onto the woman confidently walking down the center aisle. Zara did not rush. She did not yell. She did not look at Gloria or Tasha. Her heels clicked rhythmically against the polished marble walkway, echoing sharply in the painfully quiet room. She looked perfectly serene, a woman entirely in control of her own destiny. Gloria froze, completely paralyzed, her hands still resting awkwardly on Tasha's shoulder. The microphone dropped slightly from her lips. Tasha looked up, her eyes widening in sheer undisguised panic. Zara reached the front of the sanctuary just as Pastor Williams was stepping back up to the pulpit to transition into the community announcements and the weekly building fund update. Pastor Williams was a pragmatic man who respected power and wealth. He knew exactly who Zara was. He knew her corporate reputation. He hesitated, looking between the weeping Gloria and the composed Zara. Zara gracefully climbed the 3 short steps to the altar. She did not try to snatch the microphone from Gloria. She simply walked past the trembling older woman, completely ignoring her existence, and approached the pulpit. Pastor Williams, slightly intimidated by her absolute unyielding presence, instinctively handed her the main microphone. Zara turned to face the massive congregation. She smiled, a warm, genuine smile that stood in stark contrast to the vicious monster Gloria had just described. "Good morning, Greater Grace," Zara said, her voice smooth, calm, and carrying perfectly across the silent sanctuary. "I apologize for interrupting the service, but I felt it was incredibly important to address the community today regarding a long-standing promise." She did not defend herself against Gloria's barren insults. She did not mention the divorce. She did not mention the corporate takeover. She simply shifted the entire battlefield. 11 months ago, Darren Vance stood on this exact stage. Zara continued her tone, conversational but carrying lethal weight. He stood right here and publicly pledged a donation of $500,000 to build the new youth community center in the South Ward. He received a standing ovation. He took photos with the youth choir. He promised that the funds would be transferred from Legacy Logistics by the end of the year to ensure those children had a safe educational haven. The congregation nodded, remembering the highly publicized, lavish pledge. Pastor Williams shifted uncomfortably behind her, well aware that the church had never received a single dime of that promised money. As the new majority shareholder and chief executive officer of Legacy Logistics, I recently conducted a comprehensive forensic audit of the corporate accounts. Zara stated, her voice crystal clear. I wanted to ensure that all outstanding philanthropic commitments were honored immediately. However, I discovered exactly why this church never received that youth center funding. The silence in the room became incredibly thick, suffocating, and dangerous. Gloria let out a small, terrified gasp, taking a rapid step backward. That $500,000 was not delayed by a banking error, Zara announced, projecting her voice so it reached the very last row of the balcony. It was illegally embezzled. Darren Vance stole that $500,000 directly from the corporate treasury. He took the money promised to the youth of this community, and he used it to purchase a customized Mercedes G-Wagon. He used it to buy $50,000 worth of Cartier diamond jewelry. He used it to secure a luxury downtown condominium for his brother Kevin. A loud collective gasp ripped through the sanctuary. Stealing was one thing, marital infidelity was another. But stealing $500,000 promised directly to the church's youth ministry to fund a secret illicit affair was the ultimate unforgivable sin in this community. It was absolute social suicide. Zara turned her head slowly, locking eyes directly with Tasha. Tasha was visibly shaking her hands, gripping the wooden pew in front of her. "The woman sitting in the front row, currently asking for your prayers, is wearing those stolen diamonds right now," Zara said, her voice dropping into a register of pure, icy condemnation. "She is driving the vehicle purchased with the youth center funds. The Vance family did not build a legacy. They built a criminal enterprise funded by lies and stolen charity." Gloria dropped the microphone. It hit the carpeted floor with a loud, jarring feedback screech. Several prominent women in the front rows, the same wealthy, influential deaconesses who had just been nodding in sympathy, now turned to look at Gloria with absolute, undisguised disgust. The fierce, protective sympathy had vanished, entirely replaced by furious, righteous judgment. They were looking at a family of thieves. Zara turned her attention smoothly back to the congregation. She reached into her pristine white clutch and pulled out a crisp, heavy piece of paper. "I believe in transparency, And I believe in honoring commitments, Zara said, turning to face Pastor Williams. She handed the paper directly to the stunned clergyman. This is a certified cashier's check for $500,000 drafted from my personal accounts. The Youth Community Center will be fully funded today. The congregation erupted. It was not a murmur this time. It was a massive, overwhelming standing ovation. 3,000 people rose to their feet, applauding fiercely. The energy in the room completely entirely flipped. Zara was not a bitter ex-wife. She was a corporate savior, a woman of integrity stepping up to right a terrible, grievous wrong. Zara looked out over the cheering crowd and then leaned closely into the microphone one final time. I believe in supporting our community with real actions, not stolen funds. She handed the microphone back to Pastor Williams, who was staring at the certified check in absolute awe. Zara turned and walked gracefully down the altar steps. She did not look back at the pulpit. She did not bask in the overwhelming applause. She simply walked with the calm, measured stride of a woman who had executed a flawless total victory. As she walked back up the main center aisle, the congregation practically parted for her. People nodded respectfully as she passed. Gloria and Tasha were left entirely isolated in the front row, completely trapped in a nightmare of their own making. The elite social circle they had relied on to protect them had just violently turned their backs. Gloria's decades of careful social climbing were entirely completely eradicated. Zara reached the front pew. She stopped right next to where Tasha was sitting, trembling and sweating under the furious glares of the women around her. Zara did not say a single word. She simply reached into her sleek designer bag one last time and pulled out a thick, heavy manila envelope. She dropped the envelope directly onto Tasha's lap. Tasha flinched, looking down at the heavy legal document resting against her maternity dress. The word subpoena was stamped in bold, aggressive black ink across the front. Zara looked down at the terrified mistress, her expression completely blank, entirely devoid of any mercy. She turned her back on the ruined Vance family and walked smoothly out of the heavy mahogany doors, stepping directly into the bright, warm Atlanta sunlight. Tasha sat entirely paralyzed in the front pew, staring down at the thick manila envelope resting heavy like an anvil on her lap. The bright, warm Atlanta sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows felt harsh and exposing. Around her, the massive sanctuary of Greater Grace Fellowship had descended into a chaotic, buzzing hive of furious whispers. The elite women of the deaconess, board the very same women who had just been offering her sympathetic prayers, were now glaring at her with open, hostile disgust. She ripped the envelope open with violently shaking hands. Her perfectly manicured fingernails caught and tore on the heavy paper as she pulled out the legal documents. The bold black text swam before her panicked eyes, but the core message was terrifyingly clear. Zara was not just taking back Darren's company. Zara's legal team was directly suing Tasha for the immediate return of $200,000 in embezzled corporate funds. The lawsuit explicitly listed the customized Mercedes G-Wagon, the Cartier diamond sets, the luxury vacations, and every single designer handbag Darren had ever purchased for her. If Tasha did not surrender the assets and pay back the remaining cash balance within 14 days, Zara was going to press criminal charges against her for the possession of stolen corporate property. Tasha gasped, her throat tightening as if an invisible hand was choking her. She turned desperately toward Gloria, seeking any ounce of protection from the powerful matriarch. But Gloria was already standing up, her face a twisted mask of absolute shame and pure rage. "Do not look at me," Gloria hissed, her voice vibrating with a terrifying, quiet intensity. "Do not you dare even breathe in my direction. You brought the devil directly into my church. You let me stand up there and make a complete fool of myself while you were wearing stolen diamonds." Gloria, Tasha pleaded, reaching out a trembling hand. "You have to help me. I am carrying your grandsons." "Those are not my grandsons," Gloria spat out, her eyes flashing with pure, unadulterated venom. "I heard exactly what Kevin said in that condo. You are nothing but a common deceptive street hustler. You have destroyed my family. You have destroyed my reputation. You are entirely on your own." Gloria snatched her lace handkerchief and marched swiftly down the side aisle, keeping her head bowed to avoid the furious glares of her former friends. She left Tasha sitting completely alone in the massive church, isolated and entirely exposed. Tasha scrambled to her feet, clutching the subpoena to her chest. She practically ran down the main aisle, pushing past staring congregants and ignoring the harsh, highly audible insults being thrown in her direction. She burst out of the heavy mahogany doors and sprinted across the massive parking lot toward the Mercedes G-Wagon. Her hands were shaking so violently she could barely unlock the doors. She threw herself into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and immediately pulled out her gold-plated smartphone. She hit Kevin's contact picture, praying desperately for him to pick up. She needed a lifeline. She needed a plan. Kevin was an athletic millionaire. He had sports agency connections. He could hire lawyers. He could protect her from Zara's relentless legal slaughter. The phone rang 4 times before Kevin finally answered. His voice sounded ragged, exhausted, and completely defeated. "Kevin, thank God," Tasha cried, pressing the phone hard against her ear. "Zara just ambushed me at the church. She served me with a massive lawsuit. She wants the car and the jewelry back. You need to come get me right now. We need to hire a defense attorney." "There is no attorney." "Tasha." Kevin rasped, his voice completely devoid of its usual arrogant swagger. "There is no money. Zara took the condo. She had the sheriff throw me out onto the street this morning. I am sitting on a stained couch in my buddy's basement right now." "What are you talking about?" Tasha shrieked, hitting the steering wheel. "You run a massive agency. You have millions." "My agency was heavily leveraged against that condo." Kevin yelled back, his panic finally breaking through. "Darren co-signed my entire life using his company. When Zara took the company, she took my leverage. My bank accounts are completely frozen pending a federal fraud investigation. I have absolutely nothing left, Tasha. I cannot help you. Do not call me again." The line went dead. Tasha stared at the darkened screen, her perfectly curated influencer world collapsing entirely into dust. Kevin was broke. The condo was gone. The G-Wagon she was sitting in legally belonged to Zara. Darren was facing a federal indictment. She was completely, utterly trapped. But Tasha was a brilliant, ruthless survivalist. She had not climbed her way into Atlanta's elite circles by simply giving up when the walls closed in. She rapidly calculated her remaining options. Kevin was useless. Zara was a lethal, unstoppable threat. That left only one single vulnerable target: Darren. Darren was arrogant. Darren was deeply insecure. And most importantly, Darren possessed an incredibly fragile masculine ego that desperately needed to believe he was a powerful, virile patriarch. If she could somehow twist the narrative, she could use his massive ego against him. She could make him her ultimate shield against Zara. She tracked Darren's phone location using a shared family app he had carelessly forgotten to disable. The tracking dot showed him sitting stationary at a cheap rundown motel on the gritty outskirts of the city. Tasha threw the G-Wagon into drive and sped out of the church parking lot, determined to execute the greatest performance of her entire life. The motel room smelled strongly of cheap whiskey, stale cigarette smoke, and profound despair. Darren sat slumped on the edge of a sagging mattress, staring blankly at the stained carpet. His tailored suit was ruin-torn at the shoulder from his violent physical altercation with Kevin. He held a half-empty bottle of liquor in his bruised hand, his mind replaying the horrific betrayal on an endless, agonizing loop. His own brother, his own flesh and blood, had stolen his legacy. The flimsy wooden door of the motel room suddenly rattled. Tasha pushed her way inside, slamming the door shut behind her and locking the deadbolt. Her mascara was dramatically running down her cheeks. Her hair was intentionally disheveled. She looked like a terrified, broken victim. "Darren!" She sobbed loudly, throwing herself onto the filthy carpet directly at his feet. "Oh my God, Darren, I am so incredibly sorry." Darren stared down at her, his bruised face twisting with pure hostile disgust. He kicked his foot away from her grasping hands. "Get away from me, you treacherous, lying parasite," he growled, his voice thick and slurred. "Kevin told me absolutely everything. I know those kids are his. I know you played me, you and my own brother." "No," Tasha screamed, grabbing his ankles and refusing to let go. Her tears flowed freely, a masterclass in psychological manipulation. He lied to you, Darren. Kevin lied to you because he is a jealous, sick monster. Darren froze, his bloodshot eyes narrowing. What the hell are you talking about? Tasha forced her body to shake violently, wrapping her arms around her pregnant belly. You were traveling so much, Darren. You were always away building the business, working so hard to provide for us. Kevin started coming around the townhouse. He said he was just checking on me, but then he changed. He got aggressive. Darren slowly lowered the whiskey bottle, his entire body going completely rigid. He forced himself on me, Darren. Tasha wept, burying her face in her hands. He threatened me. He said if I ever told you the truth, he would tell Zara about my past and ruin everything we had built. I was so incredibly terrified. I was just trying to protect our family. I was trying to protect you from his toxic jealousy. Darren stared at the crying woman on his floor. His mind, a desperate, fragile place, desperately wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that he had not been played for a fool. He wanted to believe that his brother was the sole villain. But I am sterile, Tasha. Darren rasped, his voice breaking. The doctors confirmed it years ago. I cannot have kids. Kevin said the twins are his. Tasha looked up at him, her eyes wide and burning with intense manufactured conviction. Kevin is a liar trying to steal your ultimate victory, Darren. Doctors are wrong every single day. Miracles happen every single day. You are a strong, powerful man. These babies growing inside me are your heirs. They are your biological miracles. Kevin just wants to claim them because he knows Zara took your company and he wants to take your legacy too. Are you really going to let him win? Are you really going to let Zara and Kevin destroy the only beautiful thing we have left? Darren felt a massive, dangerous surge of adrenaline flood his veins. His ego, battered and completely bleeding, instantly latched onto this glorious narrative. A miracle. His miracle. If these boys were actually his, he still had a legacy. He still beat Kevin. He still proved Zara wrong. He could spin this entire nightmare into an inspirational story of an underdog rising from the ashes. I need proof, Darren demanded, his voice dropping into a low, dangerous register. I need absolute, undeniable medical proof right now. I want a prenatal DNA test today. I am going to shove those scientific results directly down my treacherous brother's throat. Tasha nodded frantically, wiping her dramatic tears away. Yes, Darren. Yes. We will go today. We will prove to the entire world that these are your sons. Darren stood up aggressively, pulling a thick stack of hidden emergency cash from the lining of his ruined jacket. He counted out $5,000. I know a private, discreet clinic in Buckhead that does expedited prenatal testing. They can pull the DNA directly from your blood. I am going to call them right now and buy an immediate emergency appointment. Tasha kept her face buried against her knees, hiding the sudden terrified panic flashing wildly in her eyes. She had successfully manipulated his ego, but the trap was closing rapidly. She knew exactly whose DNA was actually floating in her bloodstream. If that clinic ran a legitimate test, her entire elaborate house of cards would instantly incinerate. She needed to act immediately. While Darren paced outside in the motel parking lot, aggressively demanding an expedited appointment over the phone, Tasha slipped out the back door. She drove straight to the Buckhead Clinic, arriving a full 30 minutes before their scheduled appointment time. The private medical facility was quiet, pristine, and highly confidential. Tasha walked quickly into the sleek waiting room, scanning the area with desperate, calculating eyes. She spotted a young female clinic worker wearing blue medical scrubs organizing a stack of testing vials near a side supply closet. Tasha checked the hallway to ensure they were entirely alone. She approached the worker, quickly slipping the heavy diamond Cartier bracelet off her wrist. The diamonds caught the bright fluorescent lights, glittering with intense, undeniable value. Excuse me? Tasha whispered, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial, urgent tone. I need a massive personal favor, and I am willing to pay very handsomely for your absolute discretion. The clinic worker paused, holding a plastic vial and looking at the desperate pregnant woman. What kind of favor? Tasha held the heavy Cartier bracelet out, letting it dangle enticingly from her fingers. I am coming in for a prenatal paternity test in 20 minutes with my partner Darren Vance. But the biological father is actually someone else. A man named Kevin. They are brothers. The DNA will look incredibly similar. I need you to go into the computer system and manually alter the final results. Just change the designated biological marker to match Darren. You do that, and this $30,000 bracelet is yours free and clear. The clinic worker stared at the glittering diamonds. She slowly reached out and took the heavy bracelet from Tasha's shaking hand. She examined the exquisite craftsmanship, turning it over in the bright clinical light. "It is beautiful," the worker said, her voice surprisingly calm and completely devoid of any medical professionalism. "Truly stunning piece of jewelry." Tasha let out a massive sigh of relief. "Exactly. It is yours. Just switch the digital files when the blood work comes back." The worker looked up from the diamonds and met Tasha's eyes. Her expression was entirely cold, razor-sharp, and highly analytical. She did not look like a frightened, bribable medical assistant. "I'm afraid I cannot process that request, Tasha," the woman said, slipping the Cartier bracelet casually into the pocket of her scrubs. Tasha froze, her panic instantly returning. "Why not? I can get you more money. I can get you cash." The woman smiled, a tight, highly calculated smile that sent a terrifying shiver directly down Tasha's spine. "Because I do not actually work for this clinic," the woman replied, pulling a sleek black identification badge from under her collar. "I am a licensed private investigator, and my employer, Ms. Zara Vance, pays significantly better than a stolen bracelet." Darren stared at the sleek black identification badge dangling from the woman's neck. The fluorescent lights of the clinic suddenly felt blindingly harsh. The private investigator did not blink, her eyes locked onto Tasha with predatory amusement. Tasha stumbled backward, her expensive designer heels catching awkwardly on the polished linoleum floor. She did not ask for the Cartier bracelet back. She spun around and sprinted down the pristine medical corridor, pushing past startled nurses and bursting out through the heavy glass exit doors. The stifling afternoon heat hit her like a physical wall, but she kept running until she threw herself into the driver's seat of the stolen Mercedes G-Wagon. Her hands shook so violently she could barely key the ignition. Zara was everywhere. Zara was a phantom operating 10 steps ahead of every single desperate move Tasha tried to make. Tasha slammed her foot onto the accelerator, fleeing the clinic and speeding recklessly toward the affluent suburbs. Darren had texted her exactly 10 minutes ago, demanding she meet him at their primary marital townhouse. He had abandoned the squalid motel, claiming he needed to gather his remaining high-value watches and custom suits before the federal authorities officially moved in on the property. Tasha pulled the heavy SUV onto the manicured cobblestone driveway of the sprawling multi-million-dollar estate. The exterior of the towering brick home looked exactly the same, projecting absolute pristine generational wealth. But the moment Tasha pushed her spare key into the front door and stepped into the grand foyer, a suffocating wave of dead, stagnant air swallowed her entirely. The townhouse was pitch black. The massive crystal chandeliers hanging from the vaulted ceilings were completely dark. The low ambient hum of the central air conditioning system, the quiet whir of the double-door Sub-Zero refrigerators, the glowing blue digital panels of the smart home security interface, everything was entirely dead. The expansive open-concept living space felt like a massive, suffocating brick oven baking under the relentless Georgia sun. "Darren," Tasha called out, her voice echoing sharply against the silent, imported marble floors. He was sitting in the center of the sunken living room, perfectly still on the edge of a custom Italian leather sofa. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn tight, blocking out the afternoon sun and plunging the room into a deep, oppressive gloom. Darren had his head buried in his hands, his ruined suit jacket discarded on the floor beside him. He did not look up when Tasha carefully navigated the dark room and stood in front of him. "Darren, what is going on?" Tasha asked, her voice trembling with rising panic. "Why is it so dark in here? Did the breaker trip? Zara cut the power." Darren replied, his voice a hollow, raspy whisper echoing in the sweltering heat. Tasha wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead, staring at the shadowy outline of the man who was supposed to guarantee her absolute financial security. What do you mean she cut the power? You own this house, Darren. You pay the bills. I do not pay the bills, Tasha Darren snapped, lifting his head. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and manic in the dim light. I have not managed a single administrative household function in 6 years. Zara set up the entire infrastructure. The electricity, the water, the municipal trash collection, the high-speed internet. Every single utility account was registered strictly under her name, tied directly to her personal black card. When she seized the company and locked my accounts this morning, she also called the city. She canceled her accounts and transferred the liability back to me. The power company requires a $10,000 deposit to activate emergency service for a property this size. My cards are declining for a $2 bottle of water. They shut the grid down from the main pole exactly 45 minutes ago. The crushing reality of their absolute powerlessness slammed into Tasha. Zara had systematically dismantled their lives with surgical, terrifying precision. She had not just taken the corporate empire, she had plunged them into the literal dark ages. Did you get the test? Darren demanded, suddenly leaning forward, his voice dropping into a desperate low growl. Did you get the biological proof? Tell me you got the DNA results. Tell me I can crush Kevin right now. Tasha took a slow, agonizing step backward, her mind scrambling frantically for a believable lie. The clinic was closed, Darren. They had a massive system failure. The servers went down. They could not process any blood work today. I have to go back next week. Darren stared at her, the silence stretching painfully in the dark, sweltering room. He slowly let out a dry, humorless laugh that sounded completely unhinged. A system failure. Just like my company. Just like my entire life. The heavy sound of a vehicle tires aggressively crunching against the cobblestone driveway outside shattered the oppressive silence. A car door slammed with tremendous, violent force. A few seconds later, the front door handle jiggled aggressively before a key was shoved into the lock. The heavy wooden door swung open completely, letting a blinding shaft of sunlight pierce the dark foyer. Gloria Vance marched into the dead, silent townhouse. She was still wearing the same somber navy church suit, but it was heavily rumpled. Her usually flawless hair was slightly frizzy from the humidity, and her face was a terrifying portrait of unhinged maternal fury. She slammed the front door behind her, plunging the house back into the shadows. Darren Vance. Gloria screamed, her voice tearing through the dark house like a physical weapon. Darren flinched, pressing his hands against his temples. Mom, please stop yelling. My head is splitting open. Gloria stormed down the short staircase into the sunken living room, completely ignoring Tasha's presence. She marched directly up to her eldest son, stopping inches from his face. She was practically vibrating with absolute rage. Do not tell me to stop yelling! Gloria shrieked, her manicured finger jabbing violently into Darren's shoulder. You have humiliated me. You have completely, utterly destroyed my social standing. I walked out of that sanctuary and the deaconess board would not even look at my face. Pastor Williams asked me to step down from the charity committee immediately. You stole from the youth center, Darren. You stole from the house of God. You need to fix this mess right now. You need to transfer that money back before Zara leaks the financial audit to the local news stations. I cannot fix it, Mom, Darren yelled back, finally leaping up from the leather sofa. He towered over his mother, his chest heaving with desperate, panicked breaths. There is no money left to transfer. Zara locked the corporate treasury. She locked my offshore accounts. The FBI is literally building a wire fraud case against me right now. I am not worried about your precious social club, Mom. I am looking at 20 years in a federal penitentiary. Tasha gasped, pressing her hand against her mouth. Federal prison. The words echoed in her mind, ringing the absolute death knell of her luxurious influencer dreams. She was carrying twins for a broke fugitive. Darren grabbed Gloria by both of her shoulders, his voice cracking with sheer, unadulterated desperation. I need you, Mom. I need your help right now. I need the family money. Gloria froze, her entire body stiffening under his desperate grip. I need your retirement accounts, Darren begged, shaking her slightly. I need the Vanguard funds. I need the liquid assets Dad left in the family trust. I need $5 million wired to a defense attorney by tomorrow morning, or I am going to be physically arrested on federal embezzlement charges. You have to bail me out, Mom. You have the generational wealth. Save me. Gloria stared up at her golden son. The furious, righteous anger that had carried her through the front door began to rapidly melt away entirely, replaced by a profound, terrifying emptiness. Her lower lip began to tremble. She slowly reached up and removed Darren's hands from her shoulders. "I do not have it," Gloria whispered the words barely escaping her throat. Darren stopped breathing. The silence in the dark, hot room was absolutely deafening. "What did you just say?" "I do not have the money." "Darren." Gloria repeated, her voice cracking violently as a fresh wave of tears spilled over her eyelashes. She collapsed heavily against the edge of the kitchen island, burying her face in her hands. The pristine, unshakable matriarch of the Vance empire entirely shattered before their eyes. Tasha stood paralyzed in the shadows, watching the mighty Vance dynasty completely disintegrate. "What do you mean you do not have it?" Darren demanded, his voice dropping into a terrifyingly quiet register. "Dad left you a massive portfolio. He left you a fully funded pension. We are the Vance family. We have generational wealth." "There is no generational wealth," Gloria wailed, lifting her tear-streaked face. Her makeup was completely ruined. "Your father left us a heavy mortgage and a country club membership, Darren. He left us the appearance of wealth. The only liquid cash I actually had was my teacher's pension and the life insurance policy." "So where is it?" Darren shouted, slamming his fist down violently on the marble countertop. "Where is the life insurance money?" "I gave it to Kevin." Gloria sobbed, sliding down the side of the island until she was sitting on the dark hardwood floor. Her navy suit gathered around her knees, her dignity completely gone. "Kevin came to me 3 years ago. He said his sports agency was struggling. He said he just needed a temporary bridge loan to secure a massive client roster. He promised me he would double the money and pay me back within 12 months. He swore it was a guaranteed investment." Darren stared down at his weeping mother, the room spinning wildly around him. "You gave Kevin the family money." "I gave him everything, Darren," Gloria cried, her voice echoing mournfully in the pitch-black house. "I liquidated the pension. I emptied the savings accounts. I took a second mortgage out on my own house. I gave him every single dime because he is your brother, and I wanted him to be as successful as you. But he lost it. He lost it all on bad investments and private jets and expensive dinners. Kevin has been broke for years. He has been surviving entirely off the money you were secretly funneling to him from Zara's company." The devastating truth hit Darren with the violent kinetic force of a freight train. The entire Vance legacy was a complete theatrical illusion. The generational wealth was a lie. His mother was broke. His brother was a fraudulent parasite. Darren was the only person who had actually generated any real wealth, and he had only done it by aggressively embezzling from the brilliant corporate infrastructure Zara had painstakingly built. Zara was the actual golden goose. Zara was the empire, and he had thrown her away for a lying mistress and a fake sense of superiority. Darren fell back against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor directly across from his weeping mother. He pulled his knees to his chest, letting out a raw, agonizing sound of total, absolute defeat. The Vance family was entirely destroyed. Tasha watched them both, weeping on the floor of the dark, sweltering house. She slowly took a step backward toward the front door, her survival instincts screaming at her to run. There was nothing left here to harvest. The well was completely bone dry. Before Tasha could reach the heavy mahogany door, a series of loud, aggressive thumps echoed from the front porch. It was not a polite knock. It was the heavy, synchronized sound of multiple work boots marching up the cobblestone steps. Darren and Gloria both snapped their heads up, their tears momentarily pausing. A blinding beam of high-powered flashlight cut fiercely through the large glass panes surrounding the front door, sweeping across the dark foyer. Keys violently jingled in the lock. Darren scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding furiously against his ribs. Zara had locked the accounts. The FBI was building a case, but this felt different. This felt immediate. The heavy front door was suddenly kicked open with tremendous violent force. The lock mechanism shattered against the wood frame. 5 large men wearing heavy-duty cargo pants, dark utility shirts, and thick leather work gloves flooded instantly into the dark foyer. They carried massive rolls of industrial packing tape, heavy-duty cardboard boxes, and thick black garbage bags. "Who are you?" Darren shouted, stepping protectively in front of his mother. "Get out of my house!" The lead man, a burly individual holding a thick metal clipboard, clicked on a massive heavy-duty flashlight, aiming the blinding beam directly into Darren's face. Darren Vance, the man, barked, his voice a rough, uncompromising gravel. "Yes, that is me." Darren shielded his eyes, squinting against the harsh glare. "We are the asset recovery team contracted directly by Fulton County National Bank," the lead man stated, completely ignoring Darren's outrage. He stepped fully into the house, his work boots tracking dirt across the expensive imported marble. "This primary residence has been officially listed for immediate repossession due to a massive default on a cross-collateralized corporate loan." Darren felt his blood run entirely cold. He had leveraged the deed to this exact townhouse to secretly secure the massive illicit expansion loan for Legacy Logistics, the same loan Zara had just legally terminated. The bank executed the default clause exactly 60 minutes ago. The man continued, pointing his heavy flashlight around the dark, sweltering living room. "The property deed has reverted entirely to the primary lien holder. You are currently trespassing on foreclosed bank property." "You cannot do this," Darren yelled, panic rising violently in his chest. "I need to speak to my lawyers. I need 24 hours. You do not have 24 seconds. "Mr. Vance?" the lead man replied, signaling aggressively to his crew. The 4 other men immediately dispersed into the house, shining their flashlights over the expensive furniture, the flat-screen televisions, and the custom artwork. The primary lien holder requested an immediate expedited physical eviction, the man stated, pulling a legal document from his clipboard and shoving it against Darren's chest. "Grab whatever clothing you can carry in a single garbage bag. Everything else, the furniture, the electronics, the vehicles parked in the driveway, it all legally belongs to the bank now." Darren stared at the repossession order, the harsh flashlight beam illuminating the undeniable truth. He was broke, he was homeless, and his total annihilation was completely absolute. Exactly 72 hours after the asset recovery team aggressively threw Darren Vance out of his own home into the sweltering Georgia heat, the Oakmont Country Club Grand Ballroom was completely transformed into a pastel wonderland. Tasha refused to let a minor technicality like total absolute bankruptcy ruin her carefully curated aesthetic. She had booked the prestigious country club venue 6 months ago when Darren was still the undisputed king of Legacy Logistics. When the reality of their complete financial ruin had finally set in earlier that week, Tasha did not cancel the event. Instead, she doubled down on her sheer, unadulterated delusion. She had quietly maxed out her last 3 available high-interest credit cards to pay the final catering deposit. Her logic was that of a desperate survivalist cornered by her own lies. She had invited over 50 prominent local social media influencers and 2 regional representatives from a massive national baby product brand. She firmly believed that if she could orchestrate a viral, flawless gender reveal party, the brand would offer her a lucrative 6-figure lifestyle sponsorship. She would instantly pivot from corporate wife to wealthy mommy vlogger. She would monetize the twins. She just needed the perfect optical illusion. 10-foot-tall balloon arches, composed entirely of blush pink and powder blue latex, framed the heavy oak entrance doors. Waiters in crisp white uniforms circulated smoothly through the crowd, carrying silver trays loaded with custom-colored macarons and crystal flutes of expensive sparkling cider. A massive high-definition digital projector screen dominated the back wall of the ballroom, proudly displaying the words "Vance Twins Coming Soon" in elegant, swirling gold cursive. Tasha stood in the direct center of the ballroom, holding a bright ring light and smiling maniacally into her smartphone camera. She was wearing a stunning custom silk maternity gown that swept gracefully across the polished hardwood floor. "We are just moments away from the big reveal, you guys," Tasha practically squealed to her 200,000 live stream viewers. Her voice was pitched an octave higher than normal, radiating manufactured joy. "Will the Vance Empire be welcoming two little kings or two little queens? We are so incredibly blessed. The Vance legacy is growing stronger every single day." She lowered the phone, hitting the save button, and the bright artificial smile instantly completely vanished from her face. She frantically scanned the room, her perfectly contoured features hardening into a mask of pure, anxious calculation. The brand representatives were standing near the chocolate fountain, taking notes on their tablets. Tasha needed this to look absolutely flawlessly perfect. But the reality of her broken family was currently contaminating her carefully staged set. Darren was standing near the towering display of expensive gifts, sweating profusely. He was wearing a dark charcoal suit he had managed to salvage from a heavy black garbage bag during his humiliating eviction. The fabric was severely wrinkled across the shoulders, and his eyes darted nervously around the room, constantly watching the doors. He was a man waiting for a federal indictment to drop on his head. Directly across the ballroom, leaning casually against the imported marble wet bar, was Kevin. He was wearing designer sunglasses indoors, sipping a mocktail, with profound, arrogant indifference. His sports agency was completely gone. His luxury condominium was repossessed. He was officially sleeping on a stained mattress in his friend's basement, but Kevin refused to drop his arrogant swagger. Tasha marched across the room, grabbing Darren by the sleeve of his wrinkled jacket and aggressively pulling him toward the wet bar. Darren stumbled slightly, his bruised jaw clenching, as he realized where she was dragging him. "What are you doing?" Darren hissed, trying to yank his arm away. "Keep me away from him, Tasha. I cannot even look at his face without wanting to break his nose again." "You will look at him, and you will smile," Tasha whispered viciously, her manicured nails digging painfully into Darren's bicep. "The brand sponsors are watching us right now, Darren. They need to see a strong, united family. They need to see a beautiful, loving father. If I do not land this corporate sponsorship deal today, we are going to be living in your mother's damp basement by tomorrow night." Tasha shoved Darren forward until he was standing exactly 2 feet away from his younger brother. Kevin slowly lowered his sunglasses, looking Darren up and down with intense, undisguised mockery. "Nice suit, bro." Kevin chuckled, taking a slow sip of his drink. "Did you pull that straight out of a dumpster behind the motel?" Darren lunged forward, grabbing the lapels of Kevin's shirt. "You lying, treacherous snake!" Darren growled, his voice a deadly vibrating whisper to avoid drawing the attention of the influencers. "You took my money. You took my mother's entire retirement. You tried to claim my children just to steal whatever I had left. You are completely pathetic." Kevin easily swatted Darren's hands away, smoothing his shirt with a condescending sneer. "You are the one facing federal wire fraud charges, Darren. You are the one who fired blanks your whole life. You are just completely desperate to believe Tasha's ridiculous little fairy tale because the alternative is admitting that you are completely, utterly ruined. Smile." Tasha suddenly ordered, stepping directly between the two furious men and holding her phone up high. She flashed her brilliant manufactured grin, hitting the record button. "The Vance brothers are so incredibly excited for the big reveal," she sang to the camera. Darren and Kevin instantly froze, their features snapping into rigid, terrifyingly fake smiles. They stood shoulder to shoulder, radiating pure toxic hatred, while projecting absolute familial bliss for the thousands of people watching the live feed. Meanwhile, hiding in the darkest corner of the ballroom, far away from the flashing cameras and the towering balloon arches, sat Gloria Vance. The once mighty matriarch of the Atlanta elite social scene was seated alone at a tiny cocktail table near the kitchen swinging doors. She was wearing an outdated beige dress she had not worn in 6 years. She clutched a glass of cheap club soda, staring blankly at the floor. The heavy floor-to-ceiling windows of the ballroom looked directly out onto the immaculate country club tennis courts. Gloria could clearly see the wealthy women from her former megachurch congregation walking past the glass. They were pointing directly at her, whispering behind their hands and laughing with cruel, undisguised delight. Gloria felt entirely dead inside. Her complete generational wealth was a total absolute illusion. She had handed her entire life savings, her pension, and her fully paid-off home equity directly to Kevin. He had squandered every single penny on bad investments and private jet rentals to maintain a fake sports agent lifestyle. She had spent decades ruthlessly judging other families for their financial shortcomings, while her own financial foundation was built on wet sand. She was completely, utterly destitute. Tasha finished recording the video and quickly shooed the brothers away from each other. "All right, everyone," Tasha announced, grabbing a golden wireless microphone from the DJ booth. Her voice echoed loudly over the upbeat background music. "It is finally time. We are going to count down from 10, and the massive screen behind me is going to light up with our future." The crowd of influencers cheered, lifting their phones to capture the highly anticipated moment. The brand representatives stepped forward, raising their tablets. Darren wiped the sweat from his forehead, stepping reluctantly up to the stage to stand beside Tasha. 10, Tasha shouted into the microphone, throwing her free hand into the air. 9, the crowd chanted back excitedly. 8. Before Tasha could yell the next number, the heavy double mahogany doors at the main entrance of the grand ballroom were shoved completely open with a loud, echoing crack. The cheerful background music was instantly abruptly cut off by the venue staff. The crowd of 50 influencers turned around in total unison, their phone cameras still recording. Zara Vance stepped into the ballroom. She was wearing a razor-sharp charcoal gray tailored suit that radiated absolute unyielding authority. Her posture was perfectly straight, her expression entirely unbothered. She did not look like a woman crashing a party. She looked like an executive arriving to hostilely acquire a struggling corporation. Flanking Zara on either side were two massive, imposing men wearing plain, flat gray suits. They stood with military precision, their eyes scanning the pastel-decorated room with cold, tactical efficiency. Thick, heavy silver badges hung prominently from heavy chains around their necks. They were federal marshals. The room plunged into a dense, terrifying silence. The influencers lowered their phones slightly, completely captivated by the sudden intense shift in the atmosphere. Darren took a sharp, terrified step backward, his face draining entirely of color. He recognized the federal badges immediately. His embezzlement had finally caught up to him. "Security!" Tasha shrieked, her voice cracking with pure, unadulterated panic. She pointed a shaking, manicured finger directly at Zara. "Get that woman out of here right now. She is an obsessed stalker. She is not on the guest list. Remove her." The country club event manager, a nervous man in a tight suit, rushed forward from the catering doors, signaling for the two hired security guards to intercept Zara. The guards stepped aggressively into Zara's path, raising their hands to physically block her progression. Tasha gripped the golden microphone, her knuckles turning entirely white. "You cannot be here!" Tasha yelled, her voice trembling violently. "This is a private event. I paid for this room. You are trying to ruin my babies. You are trying to ruin my brand." Zara reached the front of the ballroom, completely ignoring Tasha's frantic screaming. She bypassed the stage entirely and walked directly over to the main audio-visual control table. The young tech technician sitting behind the soundboard took one terrified look at the two federal marshals standing directly behind Zara and immediately scrambled out of his chair, retreating into the kitchen. Zara set her sleek designer handbag onto the black table. She calmly reached into her pocket and pulled out her smartphone. She picked up the main auxiliary cable resting on the soundboard and plugged it directly into her device. The massive high-definition projector screen behind Tasha, the screen that was currently displaying the swirling gold Vance twins coming soon graphic, violently flickered. The pastel image warped, heavily distorted by static, and then went entirely pitch black. Darren stared at the dark screen, his chest heaving with desperate, shallow breaths. Kevin stepped away from the wet bar, his arrogant swagger finally completely evaporating. Gloria remained frozen in her chair, unable to look away from the unfolding disaster. Zara turned around to face the silent, captivated ballroom. She picked up the secondary microphone resting on the tech table. She looked directly at Tasha and then shifted her gaze slowly to Darren and finally to Kevin. Her smile was cold, calculating, and entirely devoid of mercy. Before we find out if it is pink or blue, Zara said, her voice carrying crystal clear through the massive state-of-the-art sound system, let us find out the truth. Zara tapped the sleek screen of her smartphone. The massive digital projector mounted directly behind Tasha flashed a blinding white light. The elegant, swirling gold cursive that read, Vance Twins, coming soon, was instantly vaporized. In its place, a stark clinical document appeared blown up to 20 feet tall for every single person in the grand ballroom to read. The official header clearly displayed the logo of the discreet Buckhead Prenatal Clinic. Tasha spun around her custom silk maternity gown, tangling awkwardly around her ankles. She let out a piercing, blood-curdling scream. The flawless influencer facade cracked instantly, replaced by raw animal panic. Turn it off, Tasha shrieked, lunging desperately toward the heavy power cord running along the baseboard. But one of the federal marshals stepped effortlessly into her path, blocking her with a solid, terrifying wall of gray soot. Zara leaned closer to the golden microphone. Her tone was conversational, but laced with absolute lethal precision. What you are looking at, ladies and gentlemen, is an expedited prenatal paternity test taken exactly 48 hours ago. The biological mother is Tasha Vance. The biological father, with a confirmed 99.9% probability, is Kevin Vance. A collective deafening gasp ripped violently through the crowd of 50 elite influencers. 50 smartphones instantly zoomed in on the massive medical document, capturing the devastating proof in high-definition resolution. The live stream chat on Tasha's abandoned phone, which was still resting on a golden tripod nearby, exploded into a rapid, frantic blur of thousands of shocked comments. Darren stood completely frozen near the towering display of expensive baby gifts, his bruised face drained of all remaining color, turning a sickly, terrifying ash gray. He stared up at the giant screen, his eyes tracking the bold black letters, spelling out his younger brother's name. The miraculous heirs he had been proudly bragging about for months, the ultimate victory he thought he had finally won. They were a complete biological lie. Kevin had not just slept with his wife. Kevin had planted his own seed inside Darren's marriage and watched Darren proudly paraded around town. Kevin let out a nervous, hollow laugh from the other side of the room, holding his hands up defensively. "This is fake!" Kevin shouted, trying desperately to project his usual arrogant swagger, but his voice cracked noticeably. She fabricated this document. Zara is just a jealous, bitter ex-wife, trying to ruin our beautiful family celebration. Do not believe a single word she says. Zara did not even flinch. She kept her eyes locked entirely on Darren, watching the devastating reality slowly crush him. If this was just a simple case of pathetic cliché infidelity, I would not have wasted my valuable time crashing this ridiculous pastel circus, Zara said, her voice echoing like a judge delivering a final, unyielding sentence. But Tasha and Kevin did not just stumble into a mistaken night of passion. They are not victims of a tragic romance. They are calculating, predatory financial parasites. Zara tapped her phone a second time. The medical document on the massive screen vanished, replaced by a stark black background displaying a simple, glowing green audio wavelength graphic. You see, Zara continued pacing slowly across the front of the ballroom. Tasha and Kevin thought they were incredibly clever. They thought they could use corporate cell phones issued by Legacy Logistics to conduct their little clandestine romance. They completely forgot that as the chief operating officer, I personally implemented a mandatory cloud backup protocol for all executive devices for security purposes. I have hundreds of hours of their private conversations, but I think this specific call from exactly 14 months ago perfectly captures the true essence of their loving relationship. Zara pressed play. The ballroom fell into a dead, suffocating silence. The upbeat party music was long gone. The only sound was the crisp, undeniably clear audio recording of Tasha and Kevin echoing from the massive overhead speakers. The recording started with the sound of ice clinking in a glass, followed by Kevin's distinct, arrogant laugh. "You have to play him better." Tasha Kevin's recorded voice oozed through the speakers, dripping with heavy condescension. Darren is incredibly weak. He is completely desperate to prove he is a real man. You just need to stroke his pathetic ego. Tasha's recorded voice replied, sounding nothing like the sweet, helpless victim she portrayed to the world. Her tone was sharp, calculating, and incredibly cold. I know exactly how to play him, Kevin. I am working on it every single day. As soon as I get pregnant, Darren will put this massive townhouse entirely in my name. He is so obsessed with creating a powerful legacy, he will give me whatever I want. Darren stopped breathing. The physical impact of the recorded words hit him harder than any punch Kevin had ever thrown. He looked down at Tasha, who was currently cowering on the hardwood floor near the stage, her hands covering her face in total absolute humiliation. And then what Kevin's recorded voice asked, sounding deeply amused. Then we execute the exit strategy, Tasha's recorded voice replied, filled with ruthless ambition. We divorce him. I take the primary residence and demand half of his equity in the startup. He is too stupid to realize he never forced me to sign a solid prenuptial agreement regarding the corporate assets. We bleed him completely dry, and then you and I take the money to LA Kevin. We leave him with absolutely nothing, and we start our real life. The audio file clicked and the green wavelength graphic flatlined. The recording ended. The grand ballroom erupted into absolute total chaos. The brand representatives from the National Baby Company had heard exactly enough. They snapped their portfolios shut and power walked directly out the double mahogany doors, their faces twisted in profound professional disgust. Tasha's dream of a six-figure mommy vlogger sponsorship evaporated into thin air instantly. Her influencer friends were backing away from her, murmuring in shocked horror, their cameras still capturing every single pathetic second of her massive public downfall. Gloria Vance was still sitting at her tiny cocktail table near the kitchen doors. Her hands were shaking so violently she dropped her glass of club soda. It shattered loudly against the hardwood floor, but she did not even notice the sharp glass biting into her ankles. She stared across the room at Kevin, her golden child, the son she had secretly favored for decades, the son she had willingly handed her entire life savings to. Gloria finally understood the devastating truth. Kevin had not lost her retirement money in bad sports agency investments. He had taken her money to fund his lavish lifestyle with Tasha while they waited for the ultimate payout from Darren's eventual divorce. Kevin had willingly, systematically orchestrated the complete financial destruction of his own family just to fund a fantasy escape to Los Angeles with his brother's wife. He had bled his own mother dry without a single ounce of remorse. Darren stood entirely motionless in the center of the pastel wonderland. The 10-foot-tall pink and blue balloon arches suddenly looked like a grotesque, twisted mockery of his entire existence. His brain rapidly cycled through the past 2 years of his life. Every late night, Tasha had claimed she was visiting her sick mother. Every sudden miraculous business trip Kevin had taken, the exorbitant credit card bills, the relentless demands to transfer the townhouse deed into her name. He had believed he was a powerful patriarch building an unstoppable dynasty. But the brutal, unvarnished truth was broadcasting to thousands of viewers online right now. He was nothing but a gullible, pathetic mark. He was the bankroll for their illicit Hollywood fantasy. They had smiled in his face, slept in his bed, and plotted his total absolute ruin over expensive cocktails. They thought he was a complete joke. A low, dangerous ringing sound began to build inside Darren's ears, drowning out the frantic whispers of the crowd and Tasha's pathetic sobbing. The fragile remains of his massive male ego shattered into microscopic pieces, leaving behind a dark, blinding void of pure, primal rage. He had lost Zara. He had lost his company. He had lost his home. He was facing federal prison. And the two people responsible for his total annihilation were standing right in front of him. Darren slowly turned his head, his bloodshot eyes locking directly onto Kevin. Kevin was standing near the wet bar, his face pale and slick with sudden nervous sweat. His designer sunglasses had slipped down his nose. He took a cautious step backward, bumping heavily into a tall cocktail table. He raised his hands, palms facing outward, trying desperately to project a calm he clearly did not feel. "Darren, listen to me." Kevin stammered, his voice trembling as he realized the sheer magnitude of the violence brewing in his older brother's dark eyes. That recording was completely taken out of context. We were just joking around. We were drunk. You know how Tasha talks when she has had too much wine. Darren did not say a single word. He did not yell. He did not scream. He simply dropped his head and charged. He moved with terrifying, explosive speed, closing the distance between them in 3 massive, powerful strides. His hands curled into tight, white-knuckled fists, his entire body coiled tightly like a loaded spring, prepared to inflict maximum physical devastation. He wanted to tear Kevin apart with his bare hands. He wanted to break every single bone in his brother's arrogant face. Kevin let out a high-pitched yelp of pure, unadulterated terror and threw his arms up over his face, bracing for the inevitable crushing impact. But before Darren could even swing his fist, before he could land a single satisfying blow, the 2 federal marshals moved with terrifying synchronized speed. They stepped smoothly away from Zara and intercepted Darren mid-stride. "A man needs an heir. Looks like you just inherited a 10-year prison sentence." The sickening heavy thud of Darren's skull hitting the wood echoed sharply across the silent ballroom. The pastel pink and blue balloons swayed gently above the violent scene, creating a surreal, horrifying contrast to the brutal physical takedown. Darren gasped for air, his face pressed painfully against the floorboards, as the heavy weight of a federal marshal drove a knee directly between his shoulder blades, pinning him entirely to the ground. Darren Vance, the marshal, barked, pulling a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his tactical belt. "You are under physical arrest for federal wire fraud, corporate embezzlement, and the illegal interstate transfer of restricted commercial assets. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a federal court of law." The sharp metallic click of the handcuffs locking tightly around Darren's wrists sounded like a gunshot in the cavernous room. The 50 elite influencers who had been invited to witness a lavish manufactured gender reveal were now broadcasting a live federal takedown to hundreds of thousands of captivated viewers. The camera flashes strobed relentlessly, capturing Darren's absolute total humiliation as he lay crushed against the floor in his ruined, wrinkled suit. His massive, fragile ego was completely, utterly pulverized. Tasha backed away from the stage, her hands trembling wildly as she clutched the heavy silk fabric of her custom maternity gown. Her brilliant, ruthless survivalist brain rapidly short-circuited. The beautiful illusion was completely shattered, but her fundamental instinct to flee remained intact. She took 3 rapid steps backward, hoping to fade invisibly into the crowd of stunned onlookers and escape through the side emergency exit. She did not make it a 4th step. 2 uniformed local police officers stepped out from the shadows of the catering entrance, cutting off her only path of escape. They marched directly toward her, their expressions hard and entirely unyielding. Tasha let out a desperate, high-pitched shriek as the lead officer grabbed her wrist, spinning her around with forceful authority. "Let go of me!" Tasha screamed, thrashing wildly against the officer's solid grip. "I am pregnant. I am an innocent victim in all of this. You cannot touch me. I did not do anything wrong. I am just a mother trying to protect my babies." Tasha Vance, the local officer stated loudly, completely ignoring her frantic, hysterical protests. "You are under arrest for felony conspiracy to commit fraud, corporate extortion, and the possession of stolen commercial property." "No," Tasha wailed, her perfectly styled hair falling in messy clumps across her face as the officer forced her arms behind her back. The second set of steel handcuffs clicked shut, binding her wrists together with cold, absolute finality. "You cannot do this to me. I am a major influencer. I have brand sponsorships waiting for me. Zara is setting me up. Darren is the one who stole the money. He manipulated me." Her expensive waterproof mascara ran in thick black rivers down her cheeks, completely ruining her flawless makeup. The glittering ring lights she had so carefully arranged around the ballroom now served only to spotlight her total, devastating downfall. She was being physically dragged away from her own lavish party, her luxurious lifestyle evaporating instantly into the bleak reality of a cold, dark jail cell. She continued to scream, her delusions echoing painfully off the vaulted ceilings. From the dark corner near the kitchen swinging doors, a horrific, gut-wrenching wail tore through the air. Gloria Vance had watched her entire legacy disintegrate in under 5 minutes. Her golden firstborn son was pinned to the floor in federal handcuffs, facing a decade in a maximum security penitentiary. The woman carrying the supposed Vance, heirs the woman who had helped orchestrate this entire nightmare, was being hauled away screaming on felony extortion charges. The generational wealth Gloria had so proudly lorded over her church congregation was definitively exposed as a complete and utter fraud. Gloria fell heavily to her knees. The harsh impact tore the fabric of her outdated beige dress, but she did not register the physical pain. She threw her trembling hands toward the ceiling of the country club ballroom, weeping with absolute, unhinged despair. "Lord, help us," Gloria sobbed, her voice cracking horribly as she rocked back and forth on the hardwood floor. "Lord, have mercy on this destroyed family." Her desperate prayers echoed against the high-definition projector screen, which still displayed the massive dark void Zara had created. The elite women of the country club, who had been eagerly watching through the exterior glass windows, were now actively recording Gloria's humiliating collapse on their own smartphones. The mighty, unshakable matriarch had fallen completely from grace, stripped entirely of her pride, her money, and her absolute dignity. She was nothing but a broken, weeping woman, sitting in the ruins of her own arrogance. Kevin Vance watched his mother sobbing on the floor, his older brother struggling under the weight of federal marshals, and his pregnant mistress screaming hysterically in the grip of the local police. His trademark arrogant swagger was completely gone, replaced by sheer primal terror. He was broke, he was exposed, and he knew with absolute certainty that the authorities would inevitably look in his direction next. Kevin slowly backed away from the wet bar, keeping his eyes fixed nervously on the federal marshals. He rapidly calculated the physical distance to the heavy kitchen doors. If he could just slip through the busy catering prep area, he could make it to the rear loading dock and disappear entirely into the dense woods bordering the manicured golf course. He spun around and sprinted desperately toward the kitchen doors. He did not even make it 5 feet. 2 massive country club security guards, anticipating his exact cowardly move, stepped directly into his path. Kevin tried to violently dodge them, but the lead guard lunged forward, tackling him with tremendous physical force. Kevin flew through the air, crashing violently into a nearby lavish dessert table. A massive towering display of custom-colored macarons and expensive sparkling cider collapsed directly on top of him. Crystal glass shattered everywhere as Kevin hit the hardwood floor, groaning in intense physical agony. Sticky sweet syrup and crushed pastry covered his expensive designer clothes. The security guards hauled him up roughly by the collar of his ruined shirt, shoving him aggressively against the wall. Kevin Vance, a third local police officer, announced, stepping forward from the kitchen corridor with another pair of heavy handcuffs. "We have multiple outstanding warrants for your immediate arrest regarding massive unpaid civil debts, fraudulent loan applications, and severe financial delinquency related to your defunct sports agency. Put your hands behind your back right now." Kevin spat blood onto the polished floor, his jaw rapidly swelling from the violent impact of the tackle. He offered absolutely no resistance as the steel cuffs were slapped onto his wrists. He was completely broken, his Hollywood fantasy completely pulverized by the brutal, crushing weight of reality. He hung his head in total, silent defeat. The grand ballroom was a chaotic scene of absolute, total devastation. The 3 remaining members of the Vance family and their treacherous accomplice were entirely subdued, bound in steel chains, and surrounded completely by law enforcement. The 50 influencers stood in stunned, silent awe, their cameras capturing the definitive, catastrophic end of the Vance empire. The air was thick with the smell of spilled cider sweat and pure fear. Through the exact center of the chaos walked Zara. She did not gloat. She did not smile. She did not waste a single second reveling in their pathetic tears or their frantic, desperate excuses. Her posture remained razor straight, her expression a flawless mask of cold, lethal professionalism. She walked smoothly past the struggling, sobbing figure of Tasha, completely ignoring the frantic, pathetic insults being hurled in her direction. She stepped carefully around the shattered glass and ruined desserts where Kevin had been violently tackled. Zara approached the main audiovisual control table. She calmly reached out and retrieved her flash drive from the system, unplugging her smartphone with steady, deliberate hands. She slipped the devices safely back into her sleek designer handbag, securing her absolute, undisputed victory. She turned and walked slowly toward the center of the room, where the federal marshals were hauling a bruised and bleeding Darren roughly to his feet. Darren swayed unsteadily, his expensive wrinkled suit covered in floor dust and his own nervous sweat. He looked at Zara, his bloodshot eyes pleading desperately for a single ounce of the mercy she used to freely give him during their marriage. He searched her face for any lingering trace of the woman who had once loved him. He found absolutely none. Zara stopped exactly 3 feet away from him. The entire ballroom held its collective breath, the cameras completely focused on the brilliant, unstoppable architect of this destruction, waiting for her to deliver her final crushing blow. 6 months later, the atmosphere inside the federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta was a stark contrast to that chaotic country club ballroom. The air was entirely still, smelling faintly of lemon polish and aged paper. The heavy oak paneling and strict judicial decorum demanded absolute silence. Zara sat comfortably in the back row of the gallery. She was wearing a flawless, custom-tailored ivory suit, radiating a quiet, untouchable power. She crossed her legs, her expression entirely unreadable, as she watched the final chapter of the Vance family tragedy conclude. Darren stood before the federal judge. He looked completely unrecognizable. The arrogant, polished executive who used to boast about his unbreakable dynasty was entirely gone. His posture was severely stooped, his shoulders slumped beneath the harsh, bright orange fabric of his standard-issue prison jumpsuit. In just 6 months, he had aged a decade. Deep stress lines carved harsh canyons across his forehead, and his once immaculate dark hair was heavily streaked with brittle gray. His ego had been systematically dismantled, stripped away by relentless federal interrogations and the brutal reality of his total financial ruin. Standing a few feet away at the defense table was Tasha. Her glamorous influencer facade had been completely eradicated. She was wearing a cheap, ill-fitting gray blazer over a heavily discounted maternity dress. Her physical presence was small, shrunken, and entirely defeated. When the video of her absolute treachery leaked online, every single one of her sponsors dropped her within 24 hours. Her massive social media following evaporated, turning instantly into an angry mob that relentlessly mocked her downfall. Without Darren's stolen corporate funds to maintain her lavish lifestyle, she had been forced to declare total, absolute bankruptcy. Her designer bags, her luxury vehicles, and her massive townhouse had all been seized by aggressive creditors. The judge adjusted his glasses, reading from the thick stack of legal documents resting on his high bench. He detailed the massive scale of the wire fraud, the aggressive embezzlement, and the sheer audacity of the conspiracy. He did not mince his words. He dismantled their excuses with cold, judicial precision. Zara listened calmly, her mind briefly wandering to the only member of the Vance family not present in the courtroom. Gloria Vance had not shown up to support her golden children. She was currently sitting in a tiny, damp, subsidized apartment on the forgotten outskirts of the city. The generational wealth she had worshipped for decades was gone, squandered by Kevin, and seized by the federal government. Her prestigious megachurch community, the wealthy women she had ruthlessly judged and gossiped about for years, had completely systematically ostracized her. When Gloria attempted to attend a Sunday service a month ago, the ushers had politely but firmly asked her to leave the premises. She was entirely alone, living on a meager, fixed income, surrounded by the suffocating ghosts of her own arrogance. The sharp crack of the judge's wooden gavel snapped Zara back to the present moment. Darren Vance, the judge, announced, his voice booming through the silent courtroom. You are hereby sentenced to 10 years in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of early parole. Tasha Vance, you are sentenced to 5 years for your direct active role in this extensive corporate extortion and fraud conspiracy. Darren closed his eyes, his head dropping toward his chest. Tasha let out a sharp, pathetic sob, burying her face in her hands as the heavy reality of 5 years behind bars finally crushed her delusional hopes of a suspended sentence. The bailiffs moved in immediately, grabbing Darren and Tasha by the arms to lead them toward the holding cells. The path to the side exit led them directly past the wooden gallery benches. As Darren shuffled down the aisle, his heavy chains clinking softly against the quiet hum of the room, he stopped. He looked up and saw Zara sitting perfectly still in the back row. The bailiff tugged his arm, but Darren planted his feet, refusing to move for just one fraction of a second. His bloodshot eyes locked onto Zara. They were filled with absolute desperate regret. He saw the woman he had completely taken for granted, the brilliant architect of his initial success, the loyal partner he had discarded for a shallow pastel illusion. He finally realized the massive, catastrophic scale of his own stupidity. You were the only real thing I had, Zara, Darren whispered, his voice cracking violently, echoing with the hollow sound of a completely broken man. Zara did not flinch. She did not break eye contact. She remained seated, looking at the ruined shell of her former husband with absolute chilling detachment. Her voice was cold calm and entirely devoid of mercy. I wasn't a spreadsheet, Darren. Zara replied, her words cutting through the air like a precision scalpel. I was the bottom line, and your math never added up, added. Darren let out a harsh, shuddering breath. The bailiff yanked his arm hard, forcing him forward. Darren stumbled, dragging his feet as he was led through the heavy wooden door. The heavy latch clicked shut, sealing him away from the world for the next decade. Zara stood up, smoothing a microscopic, invisible wrinkle from her ivory blazer. She walked smoothly out of the quiet gallery, stepping out through the heavy glass doors of the courthouse and directly into the brilliant, blinding Atlanta sun. The humid southern air hit her face, but she felt entirely refreshed. A sleek, black chauffeured Maybach was idling quietly by the curb, waiting specifically for her. The driver, a tall professional man in a crisp, dark suit, immediately stepped out and opened the heavy rear door. Zara slid comfortably onto the soft, premium leather seats. She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out her sleek iPad. She bypassed her personal emails, opening her primary financial portfolio app. A vibrant green line graphed sharply upward across the screen. Her independent venture capital firm's latest aggressive corporate acquisition had officially doubled in value overnight. The market was responding perfectly to her ruthless, precise restructuring strategy. Her wealth was expanding exponentially, multiplying by the second, entirely under her absolute control. Zara locked the screen and set the tablet down on the leather seat beside her. She turned her head, looking at her own reflection in the heavily tinted privacy glass of the luxury vehicle. She saw a woman who had been dragged through the mud, who had been lied to, cheated on, and underestimated by incredibly small, arrogant people. But the woman staring back in the glass was not a victim. She was a conqueror. She was completely at peace, entirely self-made, and absolutely free. The heavy, suffocating chains of the Vance family drama were entirely broken, left behind in the dust of a federal courtroom. She knew the absolute truth now. She never needed their legacy. She is the legacy.